Yes.
The lead Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1493 of the War News Stream. And tonight we have more big news out of the Middle East, as always at this point. We've seen this evening that U.S. aircraft have descended on Tehran, the capital city, and launched massive strikes all across the entire city, and we've seen some massive explosions from those strikes. We've also seen that the U.S. has continued their deployment of a third aircraft carrier to the Middle East and is apparently leaving as of very soon. And also, Iran has begun attacking ships again near HORMUZ Strait because apparently they're getting a little bit frustrated. But it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 24 hours of news from around the world, as we have been able to hear of significant developments inside the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Western Europe, the Americas, and also Oceania over the course of the day. We have been able to hear that over the course of the past 24 hours, U.S. Armed Forces, and specifically that of the U.S. Air Force and the U.S. Naval Air Arm, have been conducting significant airstrikes throughout the Islamic Republic of Iran, including the capital of Tehran, which has seen the heaviest amount of strikes within a singular period since the start of the war. A large amount of significant government institutions have been hit in the midst of the airstrikes, and it also does appear that major damage is being caused elsewhere throughout the country, including a uranium enrichment facility near to the area of the city of Yazd, and also other locations throughout the country. However, according to some U.S. officials who have spoken to the press, they have stated that the United States has only been able to achieve a destruction of around a third of Iran's missile cities and missile ammunition dumps, and around 60% of them or so are expected to be operational and fully online at this moment, meaning that there are still a large amount of Iranian missiles and possibly even transport-erector launchers that the Islamic Republic of Iran could still use at this phase of the war, and eventually may start to deploy if their losses continue to mount for the active TELs currently operating within Western Tehran, or more so Western Iran for that matter. Additionally, we've also been able to hear that the IRGC has once again announced that the strait is closed today and has conducted significant strikes on commercial vessels throughout the area, with one of those vessels actually going adrift and running aground near to the island of Qeshm after it was directly targeted and attacked today. We've also seen that the United States of America is still trying to attempt some form of an opening of the Strait of Hormuz, or largely a free flow of traffic, but that doesn't appear to be likely, at least at the moment right now. We've also been able to hear that the Yemeni Houthis have stated their terms for their entry into the conflict in the support of the Islamic Republic of Iran, and did state that if any other additional countries join in on the conflict, the Yemeni Houthis will use all of their power available to be able to close the Bab El-Mendeb, which is the strait at the southern end of the Red Sea, which is also about as important as the Strait of Hormuz, but generally for container ship traffic and not oil ship traffic instead. We've also seen that the Saudi Arabians have come under attack once again today, and it does appear that the Islamic Republic of Iran was able to land a fairly significant hit near to the area of the Prince Sultan airbase, with visible damage being seen on the ground from satellite photography. Israel's also come under attack as well today, while the United States has been continuing its airstrikes and actions against the popular mobilization forces inside of the Islamic Republic of Iraq, or more so the Republic of Iraq to be specific. We've also been able to hear some further news in the outside periphery of the world that does largely pertain to the situation in the Middle East. As of today, the George H.W. Bush has now gone underway to be deployed to CENTCOM. We were able to hear that news about a week and a half ago that it was going to be deployed to the Middle East, but it's finally underway as of right now. We've also been able to see that due to the worsening oil crisis in the world, the Russian Federation is now banning all foreign exports of gasoline, and Australia is now making emergency purchases of usable fuel products such as gasoline and diesel from the United States of America. Meanwhile, within the U.S. government, we've been getting a wide variety of statements today that things are going well and things are not going well. According to some U.S. officials, Tomahawk stocks are running critically low within CENTCOM's area of responsibility and possibly throughout the entirety of the global command structure of the United States. We've also been able to hear that the United States of America will be diverting some weapons shipments that were supposed to go to Ukraine towards the CENTCOM area of responsibility due to the ongoing significant resource strain of the ongoing conflict. We've also been able to see that at the same time, the Ukrainian armed forces were able to see that damage has continued to be caused by the fires that have been raging in Ust-Luga at the moment, and another major drone attack is currently underway as we are live on air. We've also seen that the Ukrainians have been able to inflict significant losses onto the Russian Federation's armed forces and largely hold their forces at the front lines where they're at right now, or even push them back a little more slightly over the course of the day. We have a significant amount of news to get into over the course of the stream, folks, and we're going to be making sure to get through the news starting with our largest stories first, and then moving our way on down into smaller stories throughout the night. But before we get to that, we actually have breaking news coming out at this moment. And so, Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so let me start you off with an appetizer tonight. Right now, we're seeing inside of Russia, specifically Yaroslav, we are seeing that it looks like another oil refinery, a very large Russian oil refinery, has been hit. It's currently ablaze, and it looks like the Ukrainians were able to strike it and take it out for the most part, as we're seeing here in some images that have just been released on social media. So we're seeing multiple fires. Also, we're seeing multiple smoke columns, indicating that multiple locations on the refinery have been struck. So once again, this is the 5th largest refinery inside of Russia. I'm trying to do some research on it real quick, and we have seen that another large refinery was just hit yesterday, and that's in addition to 40% of Russia's oil exporting capacity being taken out over the last few days. So to say Ukraine's going hard on the oil infrastructure is a bit of an understatement. Russia's being hammered hard nonstop, and largely not really defending much of anything from the looks of it. But Enforcer, what say you?
And it does appear that at the moment, the drone attack that was ongoing, that I was just speaking about just a moment ago in our summary, has already started to bear some fruit, at least at the moment, of the results of its strikes, as we have been able to hear that the Yaroslav oil refinery, which was one of the largest in the Russian Federation, has been directly hit and is suffering some significant damage. This is actually the oil refinery of which we speak right here. We do understand that this shutting down of this refinery comes at a fairly crucial time, considering that the Russian Federation does need all usable fuel products just to keep the economy running, much less to also be able to try and keep the nation running with the upcoming fuel crisis that is to follow. Reduced fuel production capacity here at these refineries may mean that the Russian Federation sees that their economic situation becomes far worse, even including the upcoming oil shortages, which are now an inevitable certainty at this point if the situation in the Strait of Hormuz does not change, and it does not appear that it will change in time, at least at the moment. So a big thanks to Enforcer Matt for sharing that news with us that we just got here at the very beginning of the stream, live on air. And with that in mind, folks, it's time for us to get on into the news summary for the day, starting with our largest stories first. And so moving us on down and directly into the Middle East, we have been able to see that the war against the Islamic Republic of Iran has continued again today. And there have been significant strikes within the area of the Islamic Republic of Iran and Iraq by U.S. and Israeli forces. But most importantly, there have been absolutely major strikes that have happened around the area of the city of Tehran. The city of Tehran has largely seen that while it is getting strike daily, large air campaigns like we saw at the opening of the war over its first week have started to become a lot less common and more infrequent as the weeks have passed. However, today largely is an exception to that norm, as we were able to see that the airstrikes that were conducted over the course of this day were far larger than normal, and were able to inflict a significant amount of damage onto central Iranian government buildings and headquarters, and possibly even staff as well. We were able to see a clip here showing some of the strikes inside of Tehran right here.
Look at that.
Quite a fire. We also are able to see some additional clips here showing us the explosions of the airstrikes on their targets inside of Tehran.
It seems that there's something in Tehran, and obviously there's a lot of government sites in Tehran, and also there are some hidden military infrastructure in some of the buildings there as well that the Iranians like to hide in the middle of plain sight. But it looks like the U.S. has a general target list. I heard today from a U.S. official that apparently there's about 3,500 individual targets that are left to be struck, and apparently they're expecting to hit those very quickly. That was the time frame that was given, but of course 3,500 targets, that's a hell of a lot of work. So I'm not sure how quick that's going to be, but it looks like they're taking them out one by one, at least in Tehran today.
And it certainly does appear that that is the case, at least within the capital city, as we were able to get more footage of the explosions that were occurring within northeastern Tehran just hours ago. We see the explosions there on the ground, direct impacts on what appears to be a focalized targeting point within the northeastern part of the city, once again suggesting that they're trying to go after either an important government official or some sort of an important government institution or headquarters within the capital city.
Also, by the way, by saying 3,500 targets, and yeah, that's what they're saying. They're saying 3,500 targets. But once again, that can include individual missile launchers, that can be bunker complexes, that can be power plants. I mean, it can literally include anything. It's not just the large targets. It's also like the TEL launchers, like each individual one. So when they say 3,500 targets, they mean that. But also, that means 3,500 munitions of a certain variety. We don't know what they are. We're currently hearing that we're running low on Tomahawk missiles, and over 850 have been launched so far in the war. So that's still a hell of a lot of targets to go. And I don't think they've said exactly how many they've hit so far. I don't think they've said the current number of strikes that's been carried out, but we do know that 3,500 are apparently left, if you believe the officials.
And that is something that we do know at the moment, folks. We'll be getting to that in a little bit once we get to Washington, D.C. But we were able to see that apparently the Iranian University of Science and Technology in Tehran was also destroyed in one of these airstrikes. And we were able to get a little bit more up-close footage of the damage here in these two clips.
Oh, wow. There's like a streamer coming out of that building.
Yeah, it does look like it. And we also get another clip here of the university as well. We see that it has been heavily damaged in the strike so far. It appears that this strike was attempting to target a university of science and technology that may have been involved in some sort of an assistance or role of assistance to Iranian programs of some other form, most likely military in nature, either the production of longer-range missiles or, for that matter, the production of nuclear weaponry. And that's what we believe that that facility or university was directly hit and destroyed over, was their possible involvement inside of Iranian rocket and nuclear programs. We also were able to see that there were additional strikes within Tehran as well, and we do understand that there was some sort of a targeted assassination attempt that took place in the Hashgar district of Tehran, but we do not know who exactly was the target of the assassination at the moment and whether or not that was successful. But we do have the clips here showing the aftermath once the first responders arrived after the bombing had occurred. We also have this picture here showing that some sort of a smaller munition was used for a pinpoint strike inside of the apartment that this person was in. So we don't know who it is. Once again, sadly, we just don't have that information at the moment, and we don't have any information whether they were killed in the strike or survived. But that's largely what we're seeing right now, is that there has been significant hits, not only against Iranian institutions that may help their military programs, but also against top Iranian officials within the city as well, although we don't know exactly who they are, at least at the moment. While all of that's been going on, the Islamic Republic of Iran has been trying to retaliate in the ways that they can, and they have started to continue their attacks inside of the Strait of Hormuz. The Strait of Hormuz has been a pretty touchy subject for a lot of people, and something of a point of contention about how important it is. And while we have been able to see that oil prices generally have been somewhat low, at least for the while, generally over the entirety of the war, much to many people's surprise, we are seeing that the price of oil is once again rising, and it's now, at least for WTI crude, over $101 per barrel. This is compared to the massive price drop that we saw on Monday, where it went from about $100 a barrel all the way down into the very low 90s and the low and more so the high 80s. Correction, folks. Sorry about that. But we are able to understand that the price is now beginning to rise once again, and it's rising to some of the highest points that we've generally seen over the last month. The highest point on a daily average being $98, and if this continues, we'll be seeing that WTI crude will be reaching record prices that it has not reached so far during the conflict. We also are able to see that Brent oil prices are also rising as well, which I'll show y'all here really quickly. They are back up to $114 per barrel, which is what they reached before Monday, when we saw that both Brent and WTI plummeted in price from about, I believe it was around $100 for WTI, and then it dropped down into the low 90s and the high 80s. And then Brent crude conducted a similar swan dive from about $113 to $114 per barrel, all the way down to about $100, and sometimes hovering in between $100 and $105, but really not exceeding those margins over the first few days of this week. It appears that whatever kind of actions were taken to try and stabilize oil prices then are no longer working anymore, and they are once again beginning to naturally rise as the supply of oil is beginning to drop. The IRGC has reiterated that they will not be reopening the strait anytime soon, and as a matter of fact have conducted attacks against merchant vessels around the area today, including this one, the Thai ship Mairi Nari, which was abandoned by its crew, and after it was set adrift, ran aground onto the island of Qeshm, which we were able to see here, which was shown by Tasnim News. We can't show the full clip, but we can show the ship here run aground on shore, and the heavy amount of visible fire damage that was caused to the rear of the superstructure, which is what led the crew to abandon ship originally, and then left the ship adrift to where it ran aground at Qeshm Island. We do understand that these attacks will most likely be continued by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps to ensure the closure of the Strait of Hormuz, as they largely aren't seeing a advantageous situation on any strategic front except for their continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz. While the United States militarily can fight and destroy the Iranians in a one-on-one fight like we're seeing right now, the Iranians might be able to try and cause enough economic damage and suffering to the United States and the Western world through its continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz that it largely would be forcing the United States and most other countries to back off and largely drop most of their war goals and largely suffer a strategic defeat as a result, even if the United States is hammering the Iranian armed forces, the Iranian government, and the IRGC every single day. We actually were able to see that some of the fires that are still raging in Bandar Abbas were visible a little bit further down the coast. And then this really dystopian video right here, there was actually a kid on some swings near to the beach, while the port of Bandar Abbas, several miles in the background, was on fire and burning. I gotta say, that's a little bit of a weird thing to go to the beach and, you know, let your kids swing on the swing set while you're watching the entirety of a port burning to the ground just a couple of miles away. But, you know, I guess people do whatever they want. That doesn't seem smart to me, though. Moving on from that bit of news.
So that kid's enjoying life in the midst of this. Well, isn't it wonderful to be a kid? Like, you don't know what's really going on out there and stuff like that. You just kind of sort of live in oblivion. So sort of a strange thing, but at the same time, I'm not really sure what to make of it.
Papa, what what's that? Oh, they're having a big barbecue over there. It's like, I don't know what they're telling that kid, but I guess that kid's completely oblivious to what's going on. And the parents, I guess, for better or worse, are trying to keep them a little bit oblivious, but, might end up being a little unsafe. I would hope that they, don't get themselves hurt or, put in harm's way anyway at all by trying to just ignore the situation. But a lot of people are talking about another major announcement that's come out today, which concerns the missile cities inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran. Many people know about these. They've started to become incredibly famous over the course of the war because the missile cities are a special sort of a system that is largely endemic just to Iran. And I'll show you all one of them right here. Here it is. This is Missile City for the city of Shiraz. It is a larger roadway that appears to go to nowhere in the middle of this valley, but along the valley are these little tunnel entrances, like you can see right here, that lead into significant and deep tunnel networks, which house and supply the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps' transport-erector launchers, and also their cruise missiles as well, of all varieties, including short-range ballistic missiles and intermediate-range ballistic missiles. These missile cities have been a top priority for the United States to try and hit and knock out, and we have seen that a large amount of B-1 and B-2 bombing runs and also even B-52 standoff strikes have been attempted to be conducted against these facilities inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran to either try and knock out the access to them or to be able to try and cause enough damage that they are truly physically destroyed and completely inaccessible. We've been able to hear some concerning words from some U.S. officials that spoke to the press today that apparently, according to Reuters, citing sources with knowledge on the matter, the U.S. can only determine with certainty that they've destroyed about a third of Iran's missile arsenal. Another third of the arsenal, buried in underground facilities that have been targeted in ongoing strikes, cannot be counted with certainty as destroyed. So at the moment, we can only confirm that 1 in every 3 transport-erector launchers, or largely their missile stockpile, has been destroyed, but the rest of it is still at large. Out of the other third that are in these underground missile cities, some of them might have been knocked out or largely rendered inaccessible due to the cave-in of the tunnel entrance at the front of the tunnel, meaning that you can't really easily get into it without any amount of construction equipment, which they might not have available. But we do not believe that there has been a significant number of the missiles in storage that have been destroyed at the moment, meaning that technically Iran's volume of fire, while incredibly low at this phase of the war, could continue into the incredibly long, near indefinite future, because we cannot physically confirm whether all of these missiles have been destroyed or not, or really easily find a way to destroy them. These tunnel networks are actually largely impenetrable to U.S. attacks. The GBU-57 MOP would have the best chance of success at trying to hit and destroy these tunnels, but GBU-57s are in very limited supply, and not only that, these tunnels are actually believed to be deeper under the surface than a MOP could reach. A MOP can only reach about 200 feet plus underground to be able to try and hit a subterranean target. These tunnels are believed to be about 350 to 400 feet underground, meaning that they're actually out of the range of our deepest penetrating ordnance that can make it down towards that tunnel, meaning that there really is no way for us to physically destroy these tunnel networks, and we would have to become a little bit more creative in trying to render them inaccessible, which there's many ways that we could do that, also including hitting and striking the tunnel entrances themselves and trying to create cave-ins and just make sure that any crews that come around to try and clear out the cave-in are directly hit by additional U.S. airstrikes, or what we would call double taps, to ensure that they're never able to physically enter the tunnels after the tunnel entrances have been knocked out. So at the moment, a lot of people are talking about this at this time right now, and are really speaking about what this means in the larger picture. Is the U.S. just incapable of destroying these, or are they behind schedule, or something else entirely? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so this report right here is based on allegedly people with knowledge on the matter. That's where the source is coming from. So they're saying that only about a third of Iran's missile capabilities have been confirmed to have been destroyed. So what does that mean? 36% said the U.S. is simply unable to destroy some targets, while 35% said the U.S. is behind schedule a bit, and 14% said the U.S. is running low on munitions. And I would say very clearly, the reason why this is the case, if this is true, I would say it's because the U.S. simply can't reach the hardened shelters. They're too deep below the ground, and Iran specifically designed them to be able to withstand these type of missile strikes. So the U.S. is probably trying to strike them, but they can't count them as confirmed hits and confirmed destruction, because they can't actually confirm on the ground whether or not the missiles were actually detonated or not. So It's simply the fact they can't get to them. It's not because the U.S. is behind schedule. The U.S. has been bombing Iran like crazy. Also, the U.S. does have plenty of munitions left. We are running low on precision munitions like Tomahawk, but the rest of them, though, we have plenty of them. So I'm with the 37%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I'm generally with the 37% as well. We're unable to destroy these targets due to their location inside of the country, and not only that, how far underground they are. It is next to impossible to actually be able to physically destroy these targets. I see some people misunderstanding what I was saying a second ago. Double taps, which are a follow-up strike on the same target just only a few minutes later, are technically a war crime because, well, they're not technically, they are a war crime. But in that particular instance, it's a strike on the same target. So, for example, you hit a building with a 500-pound bomb, and then a whole bunch of ambulances and first responders show up, and then you blow it up again and kill all of those guys. That is a war crime. But with this particular situation here, that would not be a war crime, because what we're explaining isn't actually a double tap. It's similar to a double tap, but over a much longer period of time. We have reconnaissance drones that can fly over this area and monitor it, and not only that, we can also declare that this area at large is completely excluded for civilians to enter, and we could largely issue an evacuation order over the missile cities. And some people are going to say, well, wouldn't that give away the element of surprise? Don't worry, the missile city can't get up and move anywhere. It's generally unfit and would require a lot of exercise, and it would require a lot of bulking and, and pre-workouts and stuff to get that thing to where it could pack up and walk off. So generally it won't be leaving anytime soon. So we could just declare an evacuation zone over one of these areas like this missile city and state that any civilians are in there should be warned that U.S. airstrikes could happen at any moment, and they might end up being collateral. That's generally the due course that we would need to provide to those civilians to make sure that they're not going to, just wander into the middle of a military facility in the middle of us striking it. Once we do that, we can then blow away the tunnel entrances, and then we can keep drones over the area to observe that if any IRGC members come up with excavation equipment to try and clear out an entrance to the tunnel, then we hit those crews and knock them out to make sure that the tunnel entrance is never reopened. That's generally one way that we can ensure that these sorts of missile facilities are generally rendered inaccessible, but they're not completely destroyed, because we just sadly do not have the physical capability of actually destroying facilities like these right now. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I would know. And with that, we will be moving on from that little bit of news and on through the rest of the country, as we were able to hear another interesting development over the course of the day, that apparently an airstrike near to the city of Yazd was actually able to hit a uranium production plant near to the city. From what we understand, this was a yellow cake production plant near Yazd, which we do not believe is at the same level as the Natanz uranium enrichment plant or the Qeshm uranium enrichment plant, but it is able to produce yellow cake uranium. We do understand the facility apparently was directly hit. The buildings here, which are the central refining and production facilities, were apparently directly knocked out by Israeli strikes, and we do believe that this facility has been rendered inoperable due to the damage that was caused in the prior strikes that the Israeli Defense Forces conducted on the city of Yazd recently. We've also been able to hear, speaking of nuclear developments, that there was apparently another new strike near to the Bushehr nuclear power plant, and the IAEA did state that they had been informed of a new strike near to the area as of today, which is now the third strike that has come either in the proximity of the Bushehr nuclear power plant or is directly struck onto the nuclear campus. We do not know who are conducting these strikes at the moment, any of the three, so once again, it's a fairly concerning situation, and we would hope that people are not acting recklessly in the armed forces, or the leadership is acting recklessly, because attacking and hitting a power-producing nuclear reactor inside of the Islamic Republic of Iran, that's the only one, could lead to absolutely disastrous results, and that would be an absolutely horrendous idea to try and hit that power plant, because the fallout and the damage would be truly immense. We've also been able to hear additionally that further on north, before we get to Isfahan and Avaj, near to the area of Iraq, it does appear that the Israeli Defense Forces and the Israeli Air Force were able to conduct another hit on the IR-40 research reactor near to Iraq. We were able to confirm that the heavy water reactor was directly hit, and we have video evidence here showing the smoke plume coming from the reactor in the distance. This, by the way, I
thought the Israelis had already hit the Iraq reactor before. Or am I getting confused with the 2025 strikes in the summer?
Actually, they've hit it about 3 times. One time in 2025, one time prior in this conflict, and now a second time. I don't know why they're hitting it so much, but let me see if I can go and find this reactor here really quickly. It's somewhere along this ridge line over here. Let me see. Let me just type it in. Maybe we can find it on Google. The IR-40 Okay, so I'm going to have to go and find some GPS coordinates for this thing. It's somewhere in this general area. It's just north of Iraq. But sadly, folks, I'm not finding it easily at the moment right now. So let me go and pull this one up. The IR-40 reactor at Iraq. And let me go see if I can find this thing and exactly where it is in the world. And let's see. I'll just show you all a picture of it. This is the Iraq reactor. We did understand that just about, I believe it was 2 weeks ago, it was directly hit by the Israelis, and now we understand that it's been hit a second time so far in the conflict, and we can see that it's venting a significant amount of what seems to be steam or steam vapor from the exposed reactor. So this may lead us to believe that the last strike that was conducted by the Israelis may have not directly hit the research reactor itself. It may have hit somewhere on the facility, but not directly on it. And now this strike, due to the amount of steam and vapor that we're seeing in the air, may have actually directly hit the reactor itself, and that may be the steam of the heavy water escaping into the open air that we're watching in that clip right there. So we can confirm that the Israelis did hit a research reactor today. I do have to make it clear, folks, that generally a research reactor getting hit is not going to lead to the same sort of radiological incident that Chernobyl would or Fukushima would. Research reactors operate on raw uranium ore, which they throw into a pit of water. It's not any normal water, it's actually heavy water. Heavy water is used as pretty much the what would we call it? The accelerant for the reactions, and it allows for the neutrons of the atoms to be able to hit each other and collide, splitting the atoms inside the reactor, which produces a pretty significant amount of heat, which then boils the water, and then that is what is a stabilized reaction inside the research reactor. As a side product of that, it actually produces fairly high-grade plutonium, which can be used in nuclear weaponry, and the Israelis have an incredibly similar research reactor of their own at the Negev Nuclear Research Center, which we believe has allowed for them to be able to produce a significant amount of their nuclear weapons that we officially don't know about, but we do know about, because they don't really have any uranium enrichment plants in Israel, but they do have that research reactor, which does produce near weapons grade plutonium, which can also be used in the production of nuclear weaponry. So the Israelis did hit this and knock it out today. The radiological fallout from this is almost non-existent. It's going to be, at best, a wildly minor radiological incident, but we can understand that it was directly hit by the Israelis today. Strikes were also conducted inside the city of Iraq and Qeshm as well over the course of the day. We believe by the Israelis, considering that this was within the same area as the strike on the IR-40 reactor at Iraq. And we've also been able to see some other significant strikes throughout the country over the course of the day. But before we move on into the conventional strikes against conventional targets, a lot of people have been talking about the largely the strikes that the Israelis conducted yesterday in Yats, which we were now able to confirm apparently hit a yellowcake uranium factory or production facility near to the area of the city. And a lot of people are wondering whether that sort of an action would be enough to be able to stop the nuclear program inside of Iran. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so that's a pretty big hit, by the way. The Israeli airstrikes did destroy the Yellow Cake factory in Ardakan inside of Iran. And is that enough to stop a nuclear development by the Iranians? 68% said no, that will not be enough, while 12% said I'm 50-50 on this one, and 8% said yes, that will stop nuke development pretty much entirely for the most part. And I would say that it's not going to stop entirely. That's the problem, because we do know that Iran has already several hundred kilograms of highly enriched uranium at 60%, which is enough for about 8 to 10 nuclear warheads potentially. So that's already a big problem. So basically the only way to stop Iran from developing a nuke is to physically retrieve the highly enriched uranium and basically take it from them and destroy it, or simply refuse to give it back to them, one or the other. So anything short of that, and the Iranians are still going to have nukes. That's the problem. So I'm with a 68%. It's simply not enough. But Enforcer, what say you?
This is certainly not enough to stop the Iranian nuclear program. Striking physical plants and facilities that the Iranians use to try and work on their nuclear program is clearly not going to do enough to stop them. Here's why. In 2025, we bombed a midnight hammer the Natanz, Qom, and also Isfahan nuclear research campuses. The President of the United States swore up and down after that they were completely destroyed and that the Iranian nuclear program would never be a problem again. We're now here again, 8 months later, and we are bombing them again because they were still working on developing a nuclear weapon, and they never stopped. If anything, they were delayed a little bit, but they kept going. So that clearly lets us know that blowing up these facilities again, and as many of them as we can across the country, is not going to create the kind of atmosphere or conditions necessary to see that the Iranian nuclear program ceases. If it didn't the last time, it's not going to do that now. That would be like saying, I tried to walk across the street without looking both ways and I got hit by a car at 80 miles an hour, but now I'm going to take my disjointed and broken body in my wheelchair and I'm going to try and cross the street again without looking both ways and see if it's going to work this time. You're going to get hit by a car going 80 miles an hour again. That's a guarantee. So generally the reality is that while these strikes are pretty conducive at slowing down their nuclear program, it's not ever going to completely stop it because the government that is in charge of the country, which is the Islamic regime, is going to keep working on developing a nuclear weapon no matter how many of these facilities that we destroy. And that's why, folks, we have been saying for the longest time here that we have to see that the Islamic regime is overthrown. If we can't physically destroy their nuclear facilities and stop their willpower and aptitude to try and develop nuclear weapons, that means that the only thing that we can accept is the complete dismantlement of the Islamic regime, which is sponsoring, funding, and operating the nuclear programs that are attempting to develop a nuclear weapon, ICBMs, and are funding terrorist forces throughout the region. That is clearly the only thing that will achieve any success within this region. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion, because that seems to me, folks, to be the only reason we are fighting this war. Because if we're fighting the war, folks, to just cause them a little bit of damage, what good is that really doing us? Think about that for a minute. Originally, when we started this war, the President of the United States said that we were going to overthrow the Islamic regime, which I was entirely on board with, because that seemed to be a very rational sort of a conclusion, that if we can't physically destroy the facilities through airstrikes, and also on top of that, they're just going to keep working on the nuclear program no matter how much damage we cause to it, then that means that we need to overthrow the Islamic regime. So now that we've seen that we killed Yemeni at the beginning of the war, and that didn't really do anything to topple their government, now we've tried to just lower the war goals to something a lot more achievable, but a lot less realistic for our strategic ambitions, which is just cutting down their military to size. What good is that going to do us? Their military, conventionally, was not the problem. And their military is basically a whole bunch of people picking boogers out of their nose and just waiting for a JDAM to drop on them. So what good is that going to do us to cut their military down to size? The reality of it is that we have to go in and overthrow the Islamic regime. That it should be the primary war goal. If we do not, they are going to go right back to all of the problems that we had with them initially, which was the development of nuclear weapons, the development of ICBMs to be able to try and reach the United States, and their funding of terrorist groups to try and undermine the U.S. sphere of influence within the region, and also destabilize the American-aligned parts of the Middle East. That's why that war goal should be maintained, and that we should continue to press that forward, because no amount of strikes or successes like we're seeing at Yazd are truly going to end the Islamic regime's ambitions to achieve a nuclearized state. But moving us on from that and on into the rest of our news, moving us on to conventional strikes that have been seen throughout the area, we were able to see that in Isfahan there were some more direct strikes on IRGC facilities within the city, which we were able to see right here.
I think that might be a duplicate clip right there. I think we saw that one earlier.
Oh no, this is actually from Isfahan. A little bit different. Like the fire plume looks similar, but it's actually in Isfahan. The other one was in Tehran. Moving us on from that clip, we also were able to see that down near the area of Avaj, which is near to the Iraqi border, that there were some significant military sites, such as Quneitra in Avaj, Iran, that were directly hit and damaged. We believe that these strikes are trying to once again degrade the IRGC's military capabilities, but I've got to once again be entirely honest with y'all, outside of weakening the IRGC and the Iranian military's capabilities to conduct major strikes against the Islamic regime and eventually see that we somehow are able to overthrow their government, conducting any further strikes on them doesn't really achieve anything, an actual aim, scope, or goal, because it's not doing anything to try and further thwart the Iranian, the Islamic regime's attempts and aims to be able to try and produce nuclear weaponry, missiles, and so on. So I hope that does address that situation well, but we can see the strikes are still a success. Meanwhile, the U.S. is now having to fight nearly a second campaign at this point inside of Iraq against the Iraqi militia of the Popular Mobilization Front, which is an actual militia that is raised and sanctioned by the government of the Republic of Iraq. So this isn't like al-Nusra, which is truly an Iranian militia from the top down, funded and operated by the IRGC. The PMF is actually a militia of the Iraqi government that has a very loose amount of control put on it by the Iraqi government, Iran, and as a result of that, we generally see a great deal of the time that they are a hotbed for radicalism in the country, including those who are radicals for the Islamic cause, or more so the Iranian cause in particular. Significant airstrikes were conducted today just southeast of Baghdad, which we were able to see in this clip, by U.S. forces against PMF units that are aligned with the Islamic Republic of Iran. And we were able to additionally see that within the western regions of the country, A-10 warthogs are continuing to lay down fire onto PMF forces that are aligned with the Islamic Republic of Iran to attempt to destroy them and largely render them inoperable against the United States of America and our forces within the region.
Holy cow.
What a burst.
Dang, man. What kind of burst was that? That was like, he unloaded the whole thing on that one strike, man. That's crazy.
Man, it really is something else right there. Let's watch that again, because if crazily enough, Matthew, this had actually started at the very beginning, like before the clip even started. We saw that they were already firing, because that white trail that's kind of following the A-10, that's actually the powder coming out of the barrel from the 30mm gun firing. So let's take a look at that again. He was holding down on the trigger, man. Like, he was just letting it rip.
Man, it started to sound like a prop plane. Like the sound was like blending in with the reverb from it and everything. That was a weird. I've never seen one fire for that long in a sustained burst like that.
Yeah, I mean, look at this, folks. When before they moved the camera, that white streak behind the A-10 is how long he had already been firing, and then he fired for about twice that length because it finally cut off right there. So he was firing from the aircraft for about 800 feet. I mean, that is a pretty long burst. Let's listen to that in seconds again. So. About 5 seconds of just continuous fire. That's pretty impressive right there.
Yeah, I will say that is impressive right there. I feel like he was really wanting to make sure that he was hitting his target. He didn't want to miss.
He just wanted to make sure that we were getting a high amount of efficacy out of these sorties right now. And there it goes. You know, the A-10 excels at these sorts of environments, really no air defense and, just laying it low with the gun. They do quite well at that, and it's pretty impressive to see they're still hitting PMF forces within Western Iraq with the A-10 Warthog and, generally just laying into them for 5 straight seconds. That's something crazy. The fire rate on an A-10 is what? Let's see, fire rate of, A-10 per second. So, let's see, the fire rate per second is 65 rounds per second. So that means that holding that down for about a solid 5 seconds or so would give us a total of about 325 rounds that were fired on the target, and I think the A-10 can only hold 1,000. So he fired off a third of his ammo in that one burst to hit those PMF forces in Western Iraq right there. Pretty wild. But moving on from that, we have also been able to get some news out of our Gulf state allies and also Western Yemen and Israel as well. And moving us on directly into that news, we have been able to hear that over the course of the day, it does appear that as the Saudi Arabians came under attack, a decent amount of aircraft, including these Flynos A320s here, had to be put into holding patterns before they were about to conduct their final arrival at the airport, or final approach to the airport, due to the fact that the area was under attack at the time. We also were able to additionally hear that near to the coastline, the IRGC appears to be trying to strike industries once again throughout the region, and we also were able to see that apparently some indications suggest that the industrial site at Al-Hid, Bahrain, had been targeted, and others claim that the Bapco refinery complex had also been struck as well. Further than that, we were able to hear that Bahrain and Qatar had come under attack, and we were able to get a limited amount of video evidence of air defense fire over Bahrain during the midst of that attack, and we also were able to hear that Qatar, due to the ongoing worsening situation with the Strait of Hormuz, has had to declare force majeure on liquefied natural gas contracts through to May 2026, canceling obligations to customers in Italy, Belgium, South Korea, and China. To put this out there for y'all, Qatar is actually one of the world's largest liquefied natural gas suppliers. And let me go and show you all this here really quickly, at least the top countries in the world that produce liquefied natural gas, because it's a little bit interesting who comes up as number one. This was 2021's figures, which are about the most recent or accurate that we really could get at this point, for natural gas exporters. And Qatar is actually the second largest in the world. Their production in billions of cubic meters actually exceeds ours by about 11 billion cubic meters, and that is, from what I understand, per year. So it's quite a significant margin, even with the United States being the third largest LNG producer in the world. Qatar being knocked out of the equation is seeing that a significant amount of the globe's LNG production is being halted at the moment. Also, by the way, just to explain this for folks, force majeure basically means, in a fancy Latin term, that they're not really able to fulfill the contract anymore due to exterior circumstances, so they're just completely canceling the contract and they're not going to fulfill it due to those external circumstances. So that does appear to be quite a significant hit today, and we can only assume that natural gas prices, especially inside of Europe and East Asia, are most likely going to start rising, possibly even skyrocketing, as a result of this declaration of force majeure today on the liquefied natural gas contracts. Additionally, the UAE did come under attack as well today, with some drones and missiles entering the area around Abu Dhabi and Dubai. And we do understand the United Arab Emirates military did state that they were engaging those missiles and drones and attempting to shoot them down. Moving us on over to Israel, we also saw that Israel has continued to come under near continuous attack over the course of the day. And we did get to see that one of the remnants of an Iranian missile actually landed within the West Bank. And we were able to see this cameraman here get right up to what I could only describe as the smoke that looks like it drags you to hell from the remnants of this missile that fell on the West Bank. You've got mail.
Hey, bro, don't go on the street. There's like a missile in the street.
Man, everyone's tweeting him, yo, did you see the missile? And he's like standing there.
He's like, baby, the missile is 5 feet to the right of me. So it's right here.
They told me, baby, better not mess with my nuclear ship. But anyways, moving on from that, we also were able to see that within Israel, it does appear that the Iranians are continuing to use cluster rounds on the area, which we were able to see right here.
Another war crime.
Another war crime, just adding on to the large total. At this point, the Iranians are basically using nothing but cluster round type missiles, and every single one of those is a war crime and a violation of the Geneva Convention. Moving us on out of that, we've now got to get down to the major news that we have been able to hear out of the area of the Strait of, the Strait of the Red Sea, or the Bab El-Mendeb, as it's technically called. But a lot of people are talking about here in Washington a couple of other important things before we get to that, because what we're about to get to down there near the Bab El-Mendeb is a little bit significant. We have been able to hear that apparently, according to the Secretary of State, he has stated today that the war will not be prolonged. However, at the same time, he also stated that the U.S. is going to be diverting weapons from Ukraine to the Iranian war to be able to work on the decreasing amount of munitions that we have and the need to prioritize fronts. And so for that reason, we're prioritizing U.S. forces, and we're going to be trying to give them most of the equipment that was going to be sent to Ukraine instead, which would give us the idea that this war is going to be lasting for a good bit longer, because we're trying to make sure to shore up our stockpiles to ensure that we can keep this thing going for weeks or even months on end. And this is leading a lot of people to talk about what is going to be happening with this. Is this war truly going to end soon? Or have we won? Are we winning? Or are we about to win? And also, what are y'all thinking about that as well? And Matthew, what are you thinking about it?
Okay, so the U.S. officials today continue to insist that the Iran war will not become a prolonged conflict despite the setbacks. So what are your thoughts? 64% said the Iran war will drag out, while 18% said the Iran war will actually end pretty soon, and 13% said it's a toss-up, and I'm 50-50 on the question. And unfortunately on this one, I have to say, not trying to be negative, but this war is definitely going to drag out. There's no hope of this thing ending quickly at this point. We are seeing that the third U.S. aircraft carrier is on the way to the Middle East. That's also not a great sign. We're also seeing that there's a rumor that 10,000 troops are going to be deployed on top of the already deployed troops, including the 2 Marine Expeditionary Units and a part of the 82nd Airborne. So that's also not indicating it's going to end anytime soon. And also the Strait of Hormuz is still closed. And on top of that, the Bab El-Mendeb or whatever, the Red Sea Strait, let's just call it that, that one appears to be going to close imminently. So it's not de-escalating, it's getting worse. And the Iranians are not negotiating. So Unfortunately, Marco came out today. He's been pretty quiet so far during this whole situation, but he came out today and basically repeated the typical standard lines that we've been hearing, which is not reality. So the war's going to drag out. It's not going to end. So I'm with the 64%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to be well within the 64% as well. This war is going to be dragging out for a good while. There is really no indication that this is going to be ending anytime soon. By Iranian rhetoric and how the war is going on the ground, this isn't ending. And there's really no way for the U.S. to just pack up and walk away. Due to the fact, for the reason, the Iranians aren't really giving up. The Iranians have to give up for us to end the war, generally at this point. Or we have to give up, and that would be a defeat. And the U.S. isn't going to accept a defeat. And generally, just to be entirely honest with y'all, the current administration isn't going to accept a defeat because they've been stating we are winning, we have won, or we're about to win for about the entirety of the war since about day 2, and it's about a month in. So that wouldn't really look too good if they had been stating we've won, we're winning, and we're going to win, and then they basically admit a defeat, pack up, and then walk off, and then largely lose our entire sphere of influence in the Middle East, and then possibly see that fallout then starts to affect our alliance with Europe, to where we also lose that part of the sphere, and then as a result, we really can't power project into East Asia, and then we largely lose the East Asian sphere as well. So generally, we're not going to see the U.S. walking away from this anytime soon because they really can. And the Iranians are not going to be walking away from this anytime soon because due to the fact that they have never seen that their blockade has been broken on the Strait of Hormuz, at this point, they're largely thinking that if they can somehow survive this whole thing and just kind of wait out the United States, they might be able to cause enough economic damage that we'll basically have to fold, admit defeat, and then pack up and walk away. So I would have to say that the war is definitely going to be going on for a while because we do not see the conditions at the moment to where Iran is truly screwed and would be forced to give up and give in to our demands, or at some point, to some extent, try and find some sort of a way to be able to at least meet us halfway towards our end. So I would have to say this war is going to be going on for a good minute.
Also, by the way, this was also another statement that was made today in the midst of saying the war was not going to be prolonged inside of Iran. They also stated, I think it was the Secretary of State was stating this, that generally speaking, so far that the Iranians are largely going to try to back down. I think that was largely a statement they were trying to make as well, that the Iranians were going to try to back down. But once again, we have not seen any public indication that the Iranians are somehow going to start negotiating whatsoever. So I don't see where they're finding hope in that whole situation about negotiating. Also, another statement they made is they said that the U.S. forces, the large amount of U.S. forces, the 2 Marine Expeditionary Units and part of the 82nd, they're just simply deploying to the Middle East as a contingency plan, which, that's kind of hard to believe that that's just a contingency. Who deploys that many forces from very critical theaters around the world just as a maybe we might do it type plan? That seems like that's a stretch, to say the least. So many people have speculated, pretty much everybody is on the same page, that ground operations are pretty much imminent at this point. Nobody knows where they're going to take place at. They don't know if it's going to be the islands or maybe the coast of Iran. Nobody knows. But, to say it's a contingency, I'm not buying that.
Also, I have to say there's been a lot of misunderstanding in the chat about how the president and stuff is going about this, and I have to explain this here because this is one that is getting to the point that it's becoming a myth nearly, that the president just says that the negotiations are going well and then the negotiations are going poorly all within hours of each other to try and throw them off. That's not throwing them off. What generally would throw them off is something like this. Let me bring y'all to a great example. The invasion of Sicily by the U.S. and Britain in 1943, and then the Normandy landings by the combined Allied forces in 1944. In both of those instances, Germany had an understanding that we were going to amphibiously land against them, either the Italians or the Germans in either of those situations, and that it was coming, because there is no way to hide that. Like right now, with the movement of the 82nd Airborne Brigade Combat Team, and then also the movement of the 31st MEU and the 11th MEU, the Iranians clearly know that all of those forces are more so geared towards rapid reactions, rapid movements, and also amphibious landings, meaning that there's definitely a landing possibility that's coming around the corner and that chance is rising. The misleading part is where it's going to happen. And that's where you mislead people. You don't mislead them by saying we've won, because they sure as hell know in Iran that we haven't won. They're still fighting us right now. So that's not really misleading them. Someone in Iran isn't going to wake up, in the Iranian government and go, wait a minute, they beat us? Like they would know. So that's not really misleading them. What would mislead them, though, is what we did leading up to the invasion of Sicily and also the invasion of Normandy, which is to mislead them as to where the landing is going to be. So, for example, with Sicily, we said, oh, the landing is going to be up near Palermo. We actually landed around the city of Vittoria here on the southern end of Sicily. So most of their forces were on the other side of the island of Sicily. When we landed at Normandy, we made the Germans believe, oh, we're actually not going to land down here in this very hard to reach beach near the Caen. We're actually going to land at Pas de Calais. And so they moved all their forces up to Pas de Calais instead of down at Normandy. So by the time that we landed, it was too late, and they really couldn't do anything to stop us or push us back off the beachhead that we made. That's how deception works. Deception doesn't work by just saying anything and everything, and things that the enemy would clearly know are openly false. Like, for example, Iran has been completely destroyed, and it's all over and we've won. Yeah. Well, I mean, the guys in the Iranian government who haven't signed an unconditional surrender and aren't up for war crimes trials right now are clearly going to know that's a lie, and it's not really going to have much of an effect on them or their warfighting capabilities.
Yeah, and also on top of that, the Iranians, unfortunately, still have a lot of leverage, and the U.S. has to take that leverage away from them if we're ever having any hope whatsoever of the Iranians ever surrendering, it's going to be very far-fetched to get the Iranians to simply surrender. They will have to be literally militarily put into submission to get them to actually quit. That's pretty much the only way it's going to come to an end. But the leverage they have right now is, once again, they're still holding the Strait of Hormuz hostage, and they're attacking ships. So that's huge leverage. That on its own is leverage enough to keep the United States at bay for a large part. On top of that, they have the leverage that they could end up hitting, like they threatened in the past, the power plant infrastructure across the Gulf states, which would cause a major disaster as well. And also, they're holding their cards on the Houthi situation as well. The Bab El-Mendeb Strait down there, the Red Sea Strait, is another possible point of leverage that they have as well. So until those points of leverage are taken away from the Iranians, there is no hope whatsoever the Iranians bring this thing to an end. Like, there's simply not, because they're terrorists. The government's terrorist, and terrorists are not going to use logic. They're not going to be generous when it comes to negotiating with the West. So, it's either finish the war militarily or, pack up and go home. And either one of those options there has sort of bad side effects to it, one or the other. So, it's a quagmire. Like, it would be wise for the U.S. just to simply admit that it's a quagmire. We'll still come out victorious in the end. I would think so. But it's going to be a lot more costly than we were predicting from the get-go because of the Strait of Hormuz crisis.
And that is definitely true. I would have to agree with that. And I see some people saying, well, the advantage is definitely going towards our side every day. And it looks like it, but not really. And this is kind of the thing about it. You can win a lot of battles and still lose the war. What's crazy about this, folks, is that you can win almost every battle in a war, and then if you lose the most important ones, you can still end up losing the war, even if you won 80% of the battles in that war. Like, for example, let me bring you back to World War II again. In 1940, when the British Expeditionary Force was surrounded at the city of Dunkirk by the German army. When that happened, even if, and this is the interesting thing about it, even if the Germans had somehow completely destroyed the British Expeditionary Forces before they were able to be evacuated, largely just the personnel, back to Britain, it wouldn't have changed anything, because Germany still wouldn't have been able to land in Britain. And the reason why is because while they won that battle, and they would have basically destroyed the entire British army up front in that one spot, in that one place, in that one battle, they still wouldn't be able to fight the battle with the Royal Navy's home fleet that was around Britain at that point to be able to land on the island. So even if they had won that battle, they never would have been able to land in Britain and win the whole war. The United States would have inevitably joined anyways because of the bombing of Pearl Harbor. We would have gone and joined the British in their fight against the Germans, and one way or another, the British would have landed with us again in Sicily in 1943, and also in Normandy in 1944, and we would have destroyed the Germans anyways again, even in that hypothetical scenario. And that's the issue. Sure, we are destroying the IRGC and the Iranian army from above inside of Iran each and every day. But the one battle that we have to win, that we are not winning right now, is the Strait of Hormuz. That's the one battle that we have to win. We could lose every other battle in this conflict for the next 2 months, and if we win the battle for the Strait of Hormuz, we have won the war, because they are no longer able to conduct any sort of blackmail or economic leverage over us by closing off the flow of oil. We now control the entire situation, and that means that we could then take our time inside of Iran, doing whatever we want and striking wherever we want, and we could conduct the war at a snail's pace, but it wouldn't matter at that point because Iran has no way to really cause us any harm or damage, and at that point everything's well within our hand. And that's what I think a lot of people are kind of missing here, is that yes, we are winning a lot of strikes, well, hitting a lot of heavy targets inside of Iran and causing a lot of damage, but that doesn't mean that because of that we're winning the war. If the Hormuz is still closed, we're still at a stalemate or even losing the war in the long run, especially now that it's become a war of attrition. So I hope that does address it.
Like, how the hell do you really retake the Strait of Hormuz? If we're being straight up honest here, it's like technically speaking, the best way to retake the strait would be invade the island. Like, let's say you could invade the islands near the entrance of Hormuz and try to control it that way, but it comes at a major cost of potentially losing a whole bunch of Marines if you invade the island. So that's a big problem as well on that front. So it's such a bad situation. That's why it was very critical to make sure before this war started that generally we had a plan in motion to immediately take control of the Strait of Hormuz and not use it as an afterthought. But because of that, we're kind of at this point here, which there's really not a good way to address it, to be perfectly honest. Whatever way the U.S. decides to address it, it's going to cost us dearly to try to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. But I see a lot of people saying, well, the U.S. doesn't need the Strait of Hormuz to reopen. Well, that's not true. The U.S. needs it open, and the entire world needs it open, because it's gonna hurt everybody's economy. It's gonna basically kill off everybody's economy unless we reopen that strait, because we're already seeing the effect of it. Global financial markets are hurting. We're seeing the oil price go through the roof. It's once again over this weekend. It's already going back up once more as the fears are growing yet again. And also, people are starting to realize there's really not a good way to reopen the strait. So it's starting to take hold of fear in the market. So I mean, it's a situation. I just don't really know where this is going to go. Like, I'm waiting to see what the U.S.'s next move is going to be, because right now they're still trying to plan it out and think it over for the most part. I think they have a concept of a plan, but I'm not sure if they've solidified it yet. But I'm waiting to see what that's going to be.
You know, folks, there's a quote that I have to emphasize these days, because it comes from one of our greatest naval strategists here in the United States, which is Admiral Mahan. And Admiral Mahan in the 19th century said, "Whoever rules the waves rules the world." And I don't think people understand that in the modern day, because a lot of people don't look out towards the seas for the control of the world. They look towards the skies. But those who control the waves do truly control this world. And that's why we have to control the world seas. There is no question about that, or misunderstanding to be had there. If we cannot control vital shipping lanes around the world, we are no longer a world superpower. We are a dying superpower, and we are going to end up becoming a country like Russia, where at best we might be able to claim a regional power status, but not a global superpower. Ships must move. Most of the world's cargo moves by ship. That means that most of our economic activity is largely behind that of the screw and the hulls of those ships that cut through the water. If we cannot see that those ships are moving, and moving here to the United States and to our allies, our economy will crumble. That is not like that is age-old wisdom. Even in the modern day, everybody knows that shipping is one of the most important strategic facets to keep absolute control over. In the modern day, there's a second facet, which is the skies. We have to control the skies and the seas, and that's something that we have to see once again in Hormuz. We can't act like Hormuz is a small sideshow on this whole thing, and we can defeat Iran on their land. It doesn't even matter if we defeat Iran on their land. If we stop them from being able to control the Hormuz, we have won the war at that point. It is within our hand. They have really no air defenses to speak of, so we control their skies, and now we need to control our seas, which is the Strait of Hormuz. Once we do those things, we've largely won at that point, and it's only a matter of time until we're able to secure an absolute victory. So I hope that does address that the best I can, because I cannot emphasize enough that we have to clear the strait. There's no way around that. It doesn't matter what kind of effort it takes, or what amount of war planning, or the scale of the operation. It must be done, for it has to be done. There's no other way. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address it the best we can, and I also had to say a humongous thanks to everyone for watching so far during the beginning of our stream. We're about to be getting on into the major news that we got out of the Houthi lands in western Yemen, and also some major news that we've gotten out of the deployment or the official statement of a vessel being underway towards CENTCOM's area of responsibility along with its strike group. But before we move on and into all of the rest of the news that we have in the Middle East, East Asia, and around the entirety of the world, including the war in Ukraine, I do want to make sure that we take a quick little break, a little pause, a respite even, to answer 3 questions from the chat. And Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping to our first of 3 super chats of our first segment, this one goes to none other than Chris Feilbach. And thank you very much, Chris, for that $50 support. And we do appreciate that very, very much, as always. And he said, today's orb word of the day is orby. This is an old word that's not in common use. It means spherical or orb-like. Like the LLC, however, orb words never die, and orby is a very good word.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say, thank you for another orb word of the day, Chris. We appreciate them greatly. And it keeps the orb of judgment alive. The orb of judgment has prospered and lived for a long time now. And a big thanks to you once again for helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible. We wouldn't be able to keep it running. And I gotta say that it's a massive and incredible thing to know that people are always supporting this channel and helping it to keep on running and throwing in interesting tidbits of facts about the orbs of judgment. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on and into the next one.
And our second one goes to Dom Green. And thank you very much, Dom, for that $50 support, that generous support as well. He said, thank you both for the excellent coverage. And do you see the UAE and the Saudis attacking Iran? And do they have the ability to even do so? And also, all the best.
And that is an interesting and deep question. And I would have to say it's definitely becoming a possibility. We've heard in the background that they're moving towards making an action like that, but we cannot confirm that they're going to do that yet. I'd say that the chances, though, on that are a lot more likely that they will eventually join in than not, because with each passing day that the Strait of Hormuz is closed, their economy is also suffering tremendously, much like many others in the West will be here soon. So I would have to say, yes, they eventually will. It's just a matter of time. But as far as how much time, I don't know, because like the snippets and snapshots that we get out of their governments whenever we hear any word about what they're talking about are very few and far in between, and it gives us very little of an understanding of what exactly is going on the day-to-day inside of those kingdoms and emirates. So I hope that does address that the best I can, and a huge thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that well. And before we move on and into the rest of the news, I've seen some people ask, well, why in the world has the Strait of Hormuz not been cleared if it was so easy? Well, I'll tell you why. Generally, when we've conducted war planning in the past as the United States, the Strait of Hormuz is the first priority that we're supposed to deal with once a war starts. So most of our military attention is supposed to be put there, not elsewhere. The way that the war planning was done this time around was that we put all of our attention towards Tehran and everywhere else inland inside of Iran, except for the Strait of Hormuz. And we didn't change that until about 12 days in. So how that works in reality, and this is why that's a big issue, is that if we give them 12 days to react, they physically have the ability to use the resources that are still intact to close the strait and then largely sustain the closure of the strait. If we attack them from hour 1 onwards and focus primarily on that, we would be able to see that the strait wouldn't be closed as badly as it is right now, and at least convoy duties would be possible. But with this, it's a matter of timing. You can't sit there and act like people do, that you can just go back and conduct a war plan to clear the Strait of Hormuz that was designed around conducting that strike on the very first hour of the war, about 12 days in or a month in, because the situation is now massively changed. And not only that, there's now mines inside of the waters of the Strait of Hormuz. We don't even know how many, but we know that there's definitely some at this point, because the Iranians are also stating that their shipping channel goes through their waters for any ships that are able to make the passage, which is showing that the international waters have certainly been mined, and we don't know where the mines are, but that also indicates that they're certainly there. So with that all put together, that's why you can't just go and easily do that now because that had to have been done on day one, hour one specifically. And the president decided, in his all knowing wisdom and judgment, that it would be a lot better to just blow up Yemeni and kill him because, by his logic, according to what officials have stated that were privy to the matter, he believed that the Iranian government would collapse within days after Yemeni was killed and the Strait of Hormuz wouldn't be an issue. And it turns out that the Iranian government didn't collapse days after Yemeni was killed. It's still around today, and they did end up closing the Strait of Hormuz as a result. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, but that's generally why it looks a lot more difficult now than it should have been, because it would have been largely a lot easier. It wouldn't have been entirely easy in a cakewalk, but it would have been a lot easier if we had seen that this would have been done at the very first hour of the war. But with that, it is time for us to move on into our last question of the segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news for the stream.
All right, and our last one here goes to Music Uploader, who puts in a 50 as well, and thank you very much, Music Uploader, for that support. He said that they've been wanting, let's see here, what does this mean right here? I feel like this is a reference to something. Do you get this reference right here? Like, what does this mean? What does this mean?
I think that means like a nuclear bomb as far as like a sun maker. I think that's like slang.
I feel like this might be something. I feel like this might be something deeper than that, possibly. I'm not totally sure about it. Would you like to read it?
Let's see. Music Uploader said, they've been wanting sun makers for so long. I say aloha snack bar. It'd be inhospitable of us to have them taste the bitter rain. And LSA. And generally, it's fairly cryptic. I don't know all of the slang there. But I do thank you for the support, Music Uploader, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible and keep this thing running. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, because folks like you support this channel and help us to keep this thing running and make this thing possible. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And before anyone keeps saying it, the president can make war plans. He is the commander-in-chief, which is the actual top leader of the military. So if he wants to go out and make a war plan, he can, and the generals have to follow that war plan. There's no such thing as the president is beholden to the war plans the generals make. Where in the world did that ever exist? Like I don't know. I don't think people understand. The commander-in-chief isn't just like the little dummy that the generals sit around and go, okay, here's the little plans. No, he actually gets to make them if he wants. It's very dumb to do that because most presidents don't have that kind of martial knowledge to be able to actually draw up a good plan. And nobody has the martial knowledge to do that entirely on their own, but they can if they want to. And they can also override their generals and say, I just want to do what I want, regardless of whether you think that's a good idea or not. That's how that works. Hate to tell you all that, but that's the reality. But moving on from that, and out of that little bit of information, we were able to hear, moving our way back towards Houthi lands in western Yemen, that the George H.W. Bush is now officially underway to CENTCOM, according to sources who spoke to CBS News. We had heard about a week and a half ago that it was going to be deployed to the Middle East, but it appears that its weighing anchor and underway status was postponed for about a week and a half, and we're now hearing that it's officially underway as of today. We've also been able to hear that inside of the Houthi lands of western Yemen, it appears that the Houthis are now laying out their conditions for joining the war. And here is what they've stated. A statement issued by the Yemeni armed forces in the name of Allah, the most merciful, and then they put in a Quran verse, out of our religious and moral responsibility in the face of the ongoing aggression of the American and Israeli enemy against the Islamic Republic of Iran and the axis of jihad and resistance and against our entire Islamic nation, with the aim of establishing the so-called Greater Israel and under the banner of changing the Middle East, and based on the position of our Yemeni Islamic people towards our Islamic nation and against any American and Israeli aggression against any Muslim country, while the American and Israeli enemy continues their aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran and against Palestine, Gaza, and Iraq and Lebanon, and the implementation of the Zionist plan with threats to the entire nation, therefore the Yemeni armed forces, in order to maintain the stability of regional security and stop the aggression, affirm the following. Firstly, the need for the American and Israeli enemy to immediately respond to international diplomatic efforts to stop the aggression against Israel and the Axis countries, considering it a brutal, unjust, and unjustified aggression that harms global and regional stability and the global economy. Secondly, the need to immediately stop the aggression against Muslim countries in Palestine, Lebanon, Iran, and Iraq, and to end the unjust siege on Yemen. Thirdly, the need to implement the Gaza Agreement and fulfill the obligations contained in the agreement regarding humanitarian and legitimate rights of the Palestinian people. Fourthly, we affirm that our finger is on the trigger for direct military intervention in any of the following cases: the joining of any other alliances with America and Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran and the axis of jihad and the resistance, the use of the Red Sea for hostile operations by America and Israel against the Islamic Republic of Iran and any Muslim country, which we do not allow, and the continuation of escalation against the Islamic Republic of Iran and the axis of of jihad and resistance, and as required by the theater of military operations. Fifthly, the Yemeni armed forces warn against any unjust measures aimed at tightening the siege on the Yemeni people. Finally, we affirm that our military operations target the Israeli and American enemy to thwart the Zionist plan and do not target any Muslim people. Nah, that's not true. They are bombing people in eastern Yemen every day. And Allah is our helper, and He is the best guardian and the best supporter. Long live Yemen, free, proud, and independent. Victory to Yemen and the free people of the nation. You know, honestly, folks, I feel like my hot take from a while ago of we should have invaded Western Yemen and crushed the Houthis physically with a ground force to make sure that they couldn't control the Bab El-Mendeb is kind of coming into fruition these days. We should have done that back then, like in 2024, because that would have been a pretty good idea. And that largely would have avoided the situation. Now we're watching the Houthis just basically biding their time until they want to close the Bab El-Mendeb. And that would be a not great situation if they end up closing the Bab El-Mendeb. We've already gone over that a lot in prior streams, so I won't go over all of the details of why that wouldn't be the greatest thing. I can tell you it's not as bad as the closure of the Strait of HORMUZ, but for the economics of shipping and handling for global logistics, it greatly increases the costs and duties of shipping and handling. So outside of that, a lot of people have been talking today about whether or not the Houthis are going to be joining soon. And it makes me wonder, an Iranian-funded and supported terrorist force in western Yemen near to a critical shipping lane that could be shut down if they just basically wave an anti-ship missile over the area of the strait, will they join? And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so the Houthis, they're laying low. They're laying low down there in Yemen right now, and I would imagine that's intentional. But they're now threatening to join the war, and the three main situations which they said they would join the war is basically they're going to join, basically speaking, because they said if the war escalates anymore, they're going to join. So basically, they're going to join. That was their announcement. So that's for people asking for the summary of all that stuff right there. Basically, the Houthis are joining the war eventually. So is it pretty much certain? That's the question. 64% said yes, the Houthis will join very soon, while 21% said no, the Houthis simply don't want the smoke, and 11% said it's a 50-50 chance. And the Houthis are kind of like bumblebees. They kind of like the smoke a little bit. Occasionally, it kind of like it does something to them a little bit. So I think the Houthis might want the smoke possibly. I can't really tell, but they have been, smoked by the Israelis before. They've also been smoked by the U.S. before. So they're not unfamiliar with the smoke, but I'm not sure if they want another what do they call it? A pull on the smoke. What is that? What's the term for it? I'm trying to think about. You know the term? The smoking a cigarette. You know what I'm talking about?
I actually don't know, sadly.
A drag on the cigarette or something like that. But anyways, I'm not a smoker, so I don't know all these terms. I'm trying to come up with them on the spot. But I would say I'm at 65%. I think the Houthis will join very soon. That was what they were announcing today. So when they try to close the Red Sea Strait, that's going to be troublesome because then the Strait of Hormuz, which is mainly the oil strait, and then the Bab El-Mendeb Strait, which is mainly more about the trade, is going to be both closed, and that's going to double whammy the whole situation. So, Enforcer, what say you?
I would say that the Houthis are definitely going to be joining soon because I think they understand the kind of leverage that they have on this area at the moment. The Bab El-Mendeb accounts for about 15% of global shipping traffic, which passes through the area of that strait every year, and it also accounts for 1 in every 3 container ships which travels the world seas per year. Meaning that this is a very significant sort of a choke point for global shipping and global logistics that could be completely shut down. Right now, there's still a lot of ships taking that passage, which I'll actually show you right here. This is the little highway of ships that are going in and out of the Strait of Hormuz. This is the amount of ships that are currently going around the southern tip of Africa. If this ends up getting shut down, we are going to see that this is going to only further exacerbate the economic difficulties that we're working with right now. And that would be a pretty bad idea. Well, 1, for us to see happen, and 2, for the Houthis to go and conduct. And considering that they know that we're in that kind of a position, they're definitely going to be closing the Strait of Hormuz at some point here in the near future. I have to say, folks, that back in the day, I came up with this very hot take that was not really that popular at the time because I was talking about the situation in the world, and I said back then, the Houthis are at basically the mouth of the Suez in the larger part, and they could threaten global shipping at any moment along with the Iranians, and the Iranians could close the Strait of Hormuz, and these guys could close the Bab El-Mendeb, or the Red Sea Strait. And I said, it would kind of be important for us to deal with them well in advance and possibly even conduct a ground incursion, a multinational coalition ground incursion with the Saudis and others to crush the Yemeni Houthis and make sure that they can't conduct an action like that in the future, because at least then it'll get rid of a trouble point. And a lot of people were not a big fan of that idea at all back then, and were saying, oh, well, that's ridiculous. They would never really do that, and on top of that, it would never end up being that big of a deal. And now with the Strait of Hormuz closed, they're doing exactly what I was saying they would probably try and do back then. And, now it seems like it would have been a pretty smart idea way back then to try and deal with the Houthis then and there, instead of allowing for the situation to happen now and the Houthis surviving intact through both administrations, the current one and the prior one, to then threaten the Bab El-Mendeb along with the Strait of Hormuz as well, which are some of the most important shipping lanes anywhere in the world. But with that, we're going to be moving on out of that little bit of news. I mean, it's a little bit crazy to see that everything eventually comes to fruition that we talk about here on the channel. It's like our predictions are generally shooting a 8 to 9 out of 10 correct analysis most of the time. But moving us on out of that, the oil situation is starting to get a little bit concerning to a lot of countries around the world. Australia, for the first time in decades, has actually started emergency fuel purchases from the United States as the global oil crisis is constraining fuel shipments. And additionally, we've also been able to hear that the Russian Federation, in an announcement today, is now banning the export of all gasoline products out of the Russian Federation. That includes diesel and also normal petrol or gasoline, depending on what you'll call it, or essence or benzene from whichever country you're from that you're watching right now. And those will all be banned.
What about naphtha?
Oh, yes, that's banned as well.
Oh, they're banning everything. I don't know why the Russians are up to this. Are they just trying to protect their own domestic supply of gasoline? Are they trying to further damage the global economy? I don't know what their real motivation behind that is.
I think it's trying to protect their own internal interest right now, because gasoline isn't really traded like oil. Like shutting down or banning oil trades would be economically significant, but shutting down gas production or gas exports is something that's really more so trying to protect the domestic situation, because by sending that gas elsewhere, they may not be able to have enough crude oil in reserve to refine more to keep their economy running, and for that reason, they want to try and avoid shortages by keeping all of the gas they currently have inside of Russia instead of shipping it elsewhere.
Yeah, it seems like it could be the case. Also, I think I suggested this about 2 or 3 weeks ago when we were talking about how we could try to mitigate the damage of the Strait of Hormuz closure. I said maybe the U.S. should consider banning exports of our oil, so that way we can hoard it here in the United States and try to lower our prices. But then we went through a whole thing about how oil prices are largely speculative for the most part, so it really wouldn't change much. But yeah, I guess from a hoarding standpoint, like keeping the gasoline specifically inside of Russia, that would prevent gasoline shortages. And also, we have seen that Russia's been suffering those even without the Strait of Hormuz being closed. Like, for example, Crimea has been having on and off gas shortages for ages, and also other areas of Russia have as well. So they've especially got a problem probably on their hands.
Also, by the way, to explain this, folks, a lack of oil is an international energy crisis. A lack of refined fuels like diesel and gas is generally a regional sort of an issue or a national issue, because how the industry works, at least in the oil industry, is that the oil is pumped out of the ground in its raw form. And also, by the way, this is something very important that I have to point out, folks, is that crude oil doesn't have an expiration date. Gasoline and diesel does, because eventually they will settle and separate, and then it's a completely unusable fuel source at that point. So it requires that you take the crude, which never expires, and then transport that somewhere. So we load it onto a ship like in Galveston, and then that ship goes all the way down to Brazil. They unload the crude oil there, and then the refineries in Brazil take that crude and then refine it into usable fuel. So, diesel, gasoline, jet grade aviation fuel, and then that's distributed throughout Brazil. So whenever there's a gas shortage, that's generally a national issue if there is an abundance of oil globally. If there is a lack of oil globally, that's an international issue that everybody is dealing with at the same time, because everybody's fighting for the oil that's left, and there's not going to be enough for everyone to get some, and the people who are getting it are having to pay a premium to be able to try and even still have oil. So that's largely how that sort of a deal works. So this has nothing to do really with trying to screw over the global markets like the Iranians are doing with the Strait of Hormuz. This more so has to do with them trying to protect protect the little bits of gas and diesel they have in their country from being shipped out elsewhere, and then they might not have the ability to refine more crude into usable fuel to keep their country running. So that's generally what the Russians are trying to avoid with that right now, and the Australians are just trying to get fuel at all. But a lot of people are currently talking about this right now, and Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so Russia has banned the export of gasoline as the global oil crisis is escalating, like we just mentioned a moment ago. So, what does that indicate, in your opinion? 41% said Russia is simply trying to protect their citizens from a fuel shortage, while 32% said Russia is intentionally trying to hurt the global economy, and 21% said, it could be both of them possibly. And I think there might be an element of both here. I'm with the 21%. Clearly, I would say the most likely answer is they're trying to simply make sure they have enough gasoline to provide to their citizens. They don't want to have, gas lines like they've been experiencing before. And Russia's very familiar with that. So they don't want that to get worse. So that's mainly why they're doing it. But also at the same time, though, I'm sure that Putin's thinking in his head, he's hoping that he can try to ban any export of gasoline, and anybody that might have needed it, they're going to be hurting for gasoline. That's going to drive the price up globally, wherever people are trying to buy Russian gas from, is now they got to find a new supplier of it, and that's going to put a strain on the whole situation. So there's probably an element of both here for the most part, I would say. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd say that Russia is generally trying to protect the Russian economy and the citizenry with this sort of inaction, and also protect their war effort as well, because fuel shortages with them in a major war would be an absolutely atrocious thing on the logistics side of fighting that continuing war in Ukraine. So I would generally say that it's multifaceted, but generally to protect the domestic situation more so than it is to screw over anyone internationally. By the way, folks, like purchases of any amount of usable fuels is usually really small, and it's incredibly rare. I mean, one of the largest fuel purchases, like in terms of like gasoline, for example, that we have heard about over the entirety of our channel's coverage was 700,000 barrels of gasoline that Russia bought from Kazakhstan. And that was the biggest amount that we've ever heard about. And to put that into perspective, folks, right now on the U.S. shores, there are probably about 10 oil tankers that are down in Galveston right now, each one carrying about 7 million barrels of crude or more, that are unloading that crude into the United States right now, to give you all a perspective of how small the refined fuels trade is versus the crude oil trade and just the massive product that's being moved. So I hope that does address that the best I can from what I would know. But with that, folks, it is time for us to move on and into one last statement out of the United States of America. Actually, we have two. One, we were able to hear that apparently Tomahawks are running critically low. From what we've been able to hear, over a month of strikes on Iran, the United States has used more than 850 Tomahawk cruise missiles. According to the outlet, remaining stockpiles in the region are now considered critically low, and as a result, the Pentagon may need to urgently redeploy missiles from other regions and ramp up missile production to try and meet the insatiable demand for it in the Middle East. We've also been able to see that apparently Potomac TRACON, which is a critical radar facility handling all DC airspace, was evacuated for the second time this month, and the FAA had to implement ground stops for flights to the Reagan, National, Dulles, BWI, Charlottesville, and Richmond airports, as they are all controlled by Potomac TRACON. Also, by the way, folks, I do have to let y'all know that the situations of domestic terror and significant incidents at military facilities in the United States is on the rise. An IED was found at the gate at MacDill Air Force Base yesterday. We've also been able to hear, I cannot say our source for this one, but there was also an IED that was found at the gate at the Vandenberg Space Force Base near to San Luis Obispo and Santa Maria today as well. And also, we found out that last night, the whole thing with Peterson Space Force Base was a little bit comical. I was able to get a little bit of information, folks, from an insider source on what exactly happened, and a member of the Space Force, and I have to say allegedly, although I read it and got it told to me from someone who kind of knew a lot about what had happened, but a member of the Space Force was inside of one of the dormitories, which, let me show you. These are actually the dormitories right here that the personnel are in, and also these on-base housing as well. And apparently the AC broke within one of the rooms, and they put in a fix order to their, superior NCOs, and it wasn't fixed for a couple of days. So they threatened as a result that they called all their senior NCOs bitches, and that they were going to bitch them out and their wives. And then they also stated that they were going to go around and start spinning the block in the base. So as a result of that, they shut down the whole base, and base security, which is the Space Force MPs, went to this guy's dorm, busted down the door, and nabbed him. And he's probably going to end up at Fort Leavenworth at this point for that one. But that was not actually a domestic terror incident. It was just someone in the Space Force wilding out, and as a result of that, they had to shut down the whole base and go nab the guy, basically.
The guy said he was gonna go see their wives.
Yeah, he said in his
Oh,
first post when he said fix the AC, he said y'all are a bunch of bitches, and I'm also going to like f your wives. And then he went on to say
oh,
after that that also I'm gonna like I can't say word for
oh
word,
yeah, don't
folks,
say
but
that.
he said he was going to go spin the block, and then that's when they got moving and got the MPs down on the guy. So the guy was stupid, and he's going to Leavenworth. I mean, we can all get
Oh
that. This
yeah,
will be a court-martial offense.
yeah. Send him to Leavenworth. Get that guy up out of here.
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, no, I mean that's a galactic crash out. I think we can call it that because it's the Space Force. But that's what happened with that, folks. That was the whole breakdown of that deal. We don't know what's up with the IEDs, by the way, folks. We don't know who's dropping those about all of these bases because one was seen at MacDill and another at Vandenberg. So one of them was near to CENTCOM's headquarters at MacDill. The other one was near to Vandenberg Space Force Base, which is very important for the Space Force's operations. So we don't know what's up with that and who's doing that. There might be a unified actor behind this, or, it could just be, pipe bombs or something that's made by Bill and Dale somewhere and they're just lunatics. We don't really know, and the FBI is trying to figure that one out right now. So moving us on from the home front situation and all of that craziness, it is time for us now to move on and into Europe, because we do have news coming out of the war in Ukraine today that is rather juicy. And moving us on and into the area, we have been able to hear. Also, by the way, I do have to mention this because this was something that the president did say. I didn't put it down on the map because I wanted to make this as brief as possible. But the president of the United States stated today largely a statement that made it sound like we might be abandoning NATO at some point in the future, which the president's acting like is new. Like we were going to be there with them tooth and nail up until now, until they treated us this way. But I don't think I don't think a lot of people are that short-term memory. I mean, it was literally just last year that he was threatening to just pack up and walk away from NATO because, in his words, NATO sucked and it was completely pointless. And he also was threatening to rip apart the entire alliance to invade Greenland. So it's like, who in the world is threatening to abandon NATO first? Was it us back then, almost a year and 3 months ago, or is it us today because the Europeans are kind of getting tired of dealing with us? And it's like, well, that's of course always open to conjecture. Clearly not a consensus there. And if we say that Europe's tired of us because of our crap from last year, then that's clearly political. But moving on from that, a lot of people are talking about that at the moment. And Matthew, what are people thinking about that? And what are you thinking about that as well?
Okay, so today we heard probably the worst possible statement from the United States officials about possibly abandoning NATO. And we heard today that the U.S. president suggested that he may abandon NATO countries over their recent actions. And what he feels and believes is NATO not coming to our aid in the Middle East when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz situation. So is NATO dead at this point? 46% said no, it's simply empty statements and it won't turn out to be anything. 32% said yes, NATO is essentially over with. And 19% said, I think this is bad, but I'm kind of 50-50 on this one. So the way I see it is, it's kind of like, when there's like roadkill or something like that, like a possum that you're not really sure if it's dead or not on the side of the road. So you poke it with a stick and you're like, come on, move. And you're trying to figure out if it's dead or not. That's kind of where NATO's kind of at right now, like all jokes aside. The president making statements like this is harming the alliance unbelievably bad, to say that they may not adhere to Article 5 because they didn't respond to a certain situation in the Middle East. We have called on NATO in the past. In fact, the United States is the only country in the world that's ever activated Article 5, and that was after 9/11. So NATO came to our aid then. And also, I heard a lie repeated once again today, which I want to make sure that we make sure to let people know that is not true. The United States does not support NATO with hundreds of billions of dollars. That is a straight up lie, and everybody knows that's not the way it works, but yet it keeps being repeated for some reason. NATO operates off a collective defense premise where each country invests in their own military, and they make sure they're ready to defend the alliance if necessary as a collective unit. There is a common defense fund, but we don't fund it with hundreds of billions of dollars. That's not true whatsoever. So it sounds to me like there's basically a slander campaign that's ongoing from the United States toward NATO for whatever reason. And I have no idea why we would be trying to destroy NATO, since that's literally what's made the United States and Europe so strong over the last few decades. But stupidity knows no bounds. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to say, the amount of people in the chat who are saying that we fund NATO is absolutely concerning. The fact that we don't fund NATO, uh, folks, like the whole NATO thing with the spending and everything is like what they're spending for themselves. Like we're not giving them money. And I think everyone keeps misunderstanding that, or people don't want to understand that, so that way they can have like a punching bag on NATO. But we don't give anyone in NATO any money. I mean, like, here's the funny thing. We give about 20 times more money for free to Israel than we do to NATO, or ever have, or ever would. So it's a little bit funny to me that people are always like, "Oh, look at NATO suckling off the American teat." It's like, couldn't we really say that more about Israel, which is a singular country and gets like $20 billion a year from the United States for free out of the tax dollars for their own national defense, and we only put like I think it's like $30 million a year into a common NATO fund. It's like, doesn't that seem more like a ripoff for just one country versus 30 of some of the most powerful countries on the planet outside the United States that isn't the Chinese? I mean, that doesn't make any sense at all. That's something that I find really, really skewed. Because, if I had to be honest with you all here, because some people are about to start making the argument, trying to split a hair that doesn't exist, that Israel is a better ally than Europe. If it came down to Israel versus Europe, Israel's being abandoned for Europe because there's a lot more value that comes out of Europe than we could ever get out of Israel economically or militarily. So I don't really know why everyone keeps on just putting Europe down to the absolute floor, and then some people pretend like, an alliance like Israel is just the greatest thing in the world and is even more powerful and more beneficial to us than the Europeans. That doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. But outside of that, I would have to say, I would generally agree it's most likely empty statements, because it'd be absolutely stupid, asinine, and just unbelievably daft to just pack up and try and leave NATO. He couldn't even really do that as the president. It would require an act of Congress, actually. But, we could still try, and that would be absolutely dumb to even attempt.
Yeah, so also, by the way, to give you all the numbers real quick, because I see a lot of people saying, that's not true, y'all have it wrong. So we'll give you the numbers then. So we'll make sure that we're proven correct. Here's the last article I see here from Reuters back in May 31st of 2024. It says Washington, meaning the United States, finances about 15.8% of the military alliances, meaning NATO's, yearly expenditure of around $3.5 billion. That's 15% of the common defense spending that NATO does. So the U.S. gives NATO about $3.5 billion a year toward their contribution toward the common defense of the alliance. Meanwhile, to give y'all some perspective here, the U.S. gives Israel about $3.8 billion a year in annual military aid. So the NATO alliance, which consists of, several, like countless members in Europe, obviously all over Europe and the United States itself, is actually funded with less money than what we give to Israel, one single state, every single year. That's annually. So that shows you it's being blown out of proportion wildly so. Like $3.5 billion is nothing in the scheme of the U.S. budget when it comes to military spending. That is basically nothing. And Israel gets more than that every single year, and that's just one country getting it. So that disproves the whole point right there to all the people saying that the U.S. is giving hundreds of billions a year. They don't. That's simply not true.
I find that so funny, man. Like, when you really look at the figures, it's like, damn, it's like we are basically like Europe is basically like the Costco value plan in terms of a military alliance. We hardly spend anything on it, and we get the largest and most powerful and also most nuclear armed alliance, which is the Europeans, to be our allies, basically paying a tiny little fee for them to be a part of a larger NATO alliance. On the other hand, for just one country, which is Israel, we spend about 20 times more on them annually than we do the whole of NATO in actual money. And I just find that absolutely crazy how people don't know that, or they don't think about that. And then also, this is the thing that's really goofy to me, because then the argument goes to, well, we get a lot more out of Israel than Europe. Like what? Like, really? Like, I gotta ask, like, what? What do we really get out of the Israelis compared to Europe if we were to pair them par for par? Which one would be more bang for the buck? Well, we're spending very little on NATO, and we get the entirety of the German army, the French army, the British army, the Polish army, all of the Scandinavian countries, the Finnish army, all of the Baltic states. We get the Italians. We get everybody mostly in the Balkans except for Serbia. And we also get Turkey as well, and we get control of the Bosphorus, the Dardanelles. We also get control over the Strait of Denmark. We get control over everything between Iceland and the UK here in this strait. And we also get to control our bases in Greenland that allow us to look over the North Pole to wait and see if the Russians or the Chinese are trying to fire a nuclear weapon at us. And that's everything that we get out of NATO. And also on top of that, we get an additional 800 nuclear weapons out of the French and the British that could be used at a moment's notice if things went from bad to absolutely dire. On the other hand, with the Israelis, we get a country that even in the middle of the war right now that we're fighting with Iran, when we ask them to do things to not screw us over, they'll do them anyways in the middle of the war with Iran and possibly jeopardize their position. We give them about 30 times more funding than we do NATO. And what we have to show for that is up until this war started, they wouldn't even allow us to base or operate our own armed forces out of their country unless if it was missile-based air defense that we were operating as a part of their larger air defense system to protect their own country and not our forces. So
we don't have to choose. We don't have to choose between Israel or NATO. That's not really the choice here. We can have both of them at the same time. My point is, for everybody saying that, NATO's worthless and NATO's too expensive to stay in it, that point is moot because we only spend, we only contribute 15% toward the collective defense spending of NATO, which is about $3.5 billion a year. So that's my point. My point wasn't to defund Israel or something like that. My point was we can have them both.
No, my point by saying that, though, is because whenever you say, like, the Europeans have a lot of value, it makes no sense to leave NATO, because people keep on saying stuff like, well, like, Europe sucks, but Israel's fine. It's like, really, it's like, what in the world does Israel provide to compare to Europe? It's like it's a far greater value to have Europe as an ally, but that's in a hypothetical. I'm not saying we have to go and just throw the Israelis in the garbage. It's still an ally, and I say that the more allies, the better. It's better to have as many allies as possible instead of just unnecessarily cutting countries off or away. So I would have to say it doesn't make any sense to start acting like, let's just treat the Israelis like we are the Europeans right now. Because it's like, what would really be the point in that? There wouldn't be any, and it would generally not be beneficial to us. But at the same time, just largely trying to beat the whole argument at the head of, well, we get a lot more out of them than Europe. It's like, not really. Like, the alliances are more so geared to their region, and Europe, if we were to just compare them par for par, generally is a lot more bang for the buck. But anyways, moving on from that, it is time for us, folks, to get on and into the rest of our news that we have gotten outside of the region. But also, I see some people saying some other stuff here about NATO funding. NATO, like, just to reiterate this again, we do not pour money into European militaries. European militaries are funded by European tax dollars. The German military is funded entirely off of German funding from their tax base. The British are the same. France is the same. The U.S. doesn't give anybody in Europe any money to run their military. That doesn't happen. But moving on from that, it's time for us to get on into the war in Ukraine. And moving us on into the war, we were able to hear that there is another major drone attack that is going on over the course of the day. And we were able to see that it was conducting significant strikes along the entirety of the Volga River and also within the Russian Central Plain regions leading up to the gates of Moscow. We also were able to additionally see further on up and near to the area of Ust-Luga that there was some ongoing developments near to the area today. I wonder what's going on up here. Let's take a look.
Kayıttı geç işi. Kayıttık.
Moving on from that clip, we also were able to see the aftermath of the damage up there in Ust-Luga as well. Let's take a little look. Oh!
Damn, that's a huge fire.
That is quite a big fire. I wonder where in the world that is exactly in the port of Ust-Luga. Looks to be right about, let's see here. Right about here, actually, because that is the same tank layout. Oh, wait a minute, hang on. Maybe not. Maybe it's further on down. Okay, so this is the area that was hit. Right about here. So this is the area that we can tell is heavily on fire at the moment, and it does appear that the damage is quite significant, extreme even. And also we were able to see another little clip here as well of the fire at Ust-Luga. So let's take a little look at this as well. quite a significant fire to say the least, and it does appear that the port of Ust-Luga is still going to be out for a foreseeable time well on into the future. We also were able to hear that inside the area of Yaroslavl, which we covered earlier as it was happening live, it does appear that there was a significant fire that occurred at the Yaroslavl refinery, as it was just directly hit as we went live on air during the stream. So a pretty impressive thing to see, and a great thing to know that we are still seeing continued strikes at the moment by the Ukrainian armed forces on critical Russian industry. Moving us directly on into the front lines in Ukraine itself, we also were able to see a Ukrainian soldier clearing out a minefield in what we would call a very cheap and efficient way. Let's take a look. Ah, yes. The old rifle on the mine trick. Works most every time. Pretty impressive sort of a thing. We also were able to see the Russian casualty report over the past 24 hours as well, which we were able to see right here. And according to Ms. DC, keeper of the records, 2,222 drones is the fourth highest daily loss. 217, trucks, supply trucks, ranks as the 11th highest, and 68 artillery ranks the 18th. March to date artillery total is the highest since August of 2025, and the anti-air systems are the highest since March of 2025 as well. Getting us on into the actual figures, we were able to see that 1,000 Russian soldiers were wounded and killed over the past 24 hours, along with 9 APCs, 217 supply trucks, 1 main battle tank, 68 artillery pieces, 2,222 drones, and 2 MLRSs. Overall, a pretty impressive day, and good to see the Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to inflict significant losses onto the Russian Federation's armed forces. We were able to hear that over the entirety of the front line today, the Russian Federation was not able to make any sort of frontline advances, and the Ukrainian armed forces are continuing to hold their line and inflict significant casualties onto the Russian Federation. Sadly, we didn't get a lot of videos of that over the course of the day. Most of it was drone-related, drone-on-drone warfare, which is really hard to generally follow and also cover continuously, as it doesn't really show the ground situation and more shows the aerial situation. But we did see that near to the area of Konstantinivka and Pokrovsk, which are some of the heaviest fought battlefields at the moment, Ukrainian armed forces were continuing to strike and hit Russian forces within these general areas, including the 30th Brigade near to the city of Konstantinivka, striking this Russian that appears to be wearing one of those police training jackets that they use to train the canines. It appears that it didn't really help him out all too much, and we can then see in this next clip here the strikes that are also being conducted on the Russians in the motorbike assault squads.
Oh, that guy was wearing that thing that literally blocked most of the heat. Like, you could barely see him if he had used the whole thing to cover it completely.
Man, one of them reflective blankets. And we see them continuing to hit Russian forces on the front. And we see them still working incredibly hard. They work long hours in Ukraine, you know. And that's the end of the clip, but still showing us the combat actions of the state of Ukraine, at least near to the Konstantinivka front today. On the very southern end of the Pokrovsk front, we also were able to see that the Ukrainians were using a drone net to take down some Russian drones. And it was actually a pretty impressive sort of a thing to watch. Here's the first victim of the Ukrainian drone net gun. And there it goes. They got it. And another one. And another one right here.
That's pretty impressive, actually. It seems like a pretty decent way to take them down, as long as they're not moving super fast or something.
I mean, they're even taking them down kind of moving quickly, like right here.
I don't know how this drone can fire that net without much recoil. This drone is firing. It's barely moving after it hits.
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know the exact type and design of this one, but it does appear to be quite effective. But with that, that's the end of the clip right there. And moving us on out of that bit of news, that is actually the end of our news for the day, which is actually ending at a record time, this time around, at only an hour and 53 minutes. And I have to say, a huge thanks to everyone who has been watching so far tonight. We had at the peak tonight about 22.5 thousand live viewers, and we've had 140,000 people watch the news segment tonight. I have to say that we're absolutely honored and greatly appreciative of so many of y'all being here tonight and watching the stream, because we try our best to make sure that we source and provide the highest quality news coverage that we can, and also give some fairly accurate analysis on the larger global situation as well. Before we move on into the second segment, I do also have to say that it has been one hell of a night and one hell of a day as well, because Matthew and me went for a little hike today up a mountain, and we ended up succeeding, but I think both of us are wildly exhausted as a result of that, and it has been one hell of a stream to be able to knock out once again, even having to battle against that little bit of exhaustion. But with that in mind, it is time for us to move on into the question segment, where we get to talk to each and every single one of y'all. And of course, we're going to be able to talk about literally anything and everything except for religion, politics, climate change, and whether or not the A-10 is relevant in modern warfare. But without further ado, let's get right on into that question segment. And Matthew, what do we got?
Also, by the way, I've seen a lot of people asking for this coverage real quick. Just to go over this, there was an Iranian attack on a Saudi Arabian airbase, and we did see satellite footage appearing to show some U.S. Air Force KC-135 aerial refueling tankers apparently damaged or possibly even destroyed on the runway as well. And also, we have heard some preliminary reports that there might be 10 to 12 U.S. service members that could have been injured in the attack, but we have not gotten official corroboration of those reports. But it does appear that there was a successful hit by the Iranians on our tankers on that Saudi Arabian base. So obviously not a good thing whatsoever with that, but hopefully the service members. And also, by the way, apparently they're saying now that it's 10 U.S. service members that were injured after an Iranian missile struck the airbase. So, yeah, it appears to be possibly some injuries and also some destruction of tankers. But Enforcer, what say you?
Fairly interesting sort of a look. We believe that this might actually be a bit older, folks, because we did hear about a hit at the Prince Sultan Air Base a while ago, and they stated that 5 tankers had largely been damaged to the point that they were not in airworthy condition. So we think that this is satellite photography of that moment in time that has finally just come out today, which does show that there was some pretty significant damage. We don't know if any aircraft were completely destroyed, but we can tell by the fuel slick on the ground, there's a pretty decent chance that one of these things may have almost completely burned out on the tarmac in the midst of the hit, and may not ever be in airworthy condition. Once again, it may be completely totaled. We're not entirely sure on that, and we'll have to wait and see, but it does appear that we can confirm that the Islamic Republic of Iran was able to land a pretty significant hit at the Prince Sultan Air Base at some point in time, and we finally have satellite photography to prove that. So with that, I hope that does address that well, and with that, Matthew, take it away.
All right, so jumping into our super chat questions and getting our live chats after that. We're starting off with our first one here, which goes to none other than Chef Danny B, a longtime channel legend, by the way. And he puts in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Danny, for that support as always. He said, "Good evening, Enforcers. Chef Danny here, and I hope all is well with y'all. And the A-10 goes hard, and we probably won't see them in mainland Iran, right? In LLT, LSA.
And sadly, we probably won't see them in mainland Iran. You are largely correct in that, because any sort of an air threat to the A-10 generally deems it too dangerous to fly within that area. And considering that Iran does have active air defenses, at least at a minimum man pads, that would be considered too dangerous for an A-10 to fly through. So for that reason, it's only going to be operating within Iraq against the PMF, which generally doesn't have any real modern air defense, and an A-10 could generally deal with them somewhat easily. So you were absolutely correct on that. Sadly, they won't be used over there in Iran. But I do have to say, huge thanks to you for support, official chef of the LSA, and things have been well. Quite well indeed. And we had a great day again today. The weather has been very nice recently, and so we went out today, a second day in a row, and we climbed a mountain. Matthew, do you think that we can show them that mountain?
Yeah, you probably could.
Let's take a look at it. Let's take a little look at it. It's this one right here. Let me see if they have... Oh yeah, look, they have a picture from the top. Look at that. So this was the mountain that we climbed today, right here. And there's a bigger one behind it, behind this camera right there. But this is the peak of a little mountain that's around the area. And it was about, I think, what was it, Matthew? Like 500 vertical feet of climb to get up here?
Yeah, just about.
It was somewhere about there. And we got up here, and the scenery was quite nice. You can actually see downtown. You can see the quarry next to it. You can see the entirety of the Wasatch Front over there. There's Timpanogos. There's Lone Peak. And I don't know what that one's called. And then I think that's the Twin Peaks right there. And then there's some other ones further on down that I really don't know the names of. But we went up here today, and it was pretty nice. I think it was like a total trek of about, let's see, what was it? 3 miles and about 500 vertical feet of gain. It was a really cool little hike. This is actually the first hill or mountain, whichever way you want to call it, that I've ever got to the top of, at least recently, because the rest of them are about 12,000 feet tall. So this was the one that was actually achievable at the moment. And I got to say, it was a really cool one to get to the top to and take a look around and then make back down. But I can tell you this. I can already tell you all this. My knees are going to be shattered from going back down this hill because I could already feel it when we're about to get off of it because it was like a very steep and very weird trail on the opposite side going down. But it was a pretty cool little thing that we did all together. So we've been doing quite well and getting into the physical fitness routines. So hopefully we'll be able to get fit and well, actually Matthew's pretty fit. Hopefully I'll be able to get fit and well in shape. So a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, by the way, I see a lot of people mentioning that it seems like Yemen might have fired a missile at Israel. I haven't seen that news just yet. I'll keep an eye out for it, though, and see what we got on this. But if that is the case, it sounds like the Houthis might have just entered the war by launching that missile. So we'll keep an eye out. I'll let you know if I see anything about it. In fact, let me do a quick scan of my source real quick here and see. Let's see what we got. So let's see here. So I am not seeing anything yet. So we'll have to keep an eye out and see if we get any news about that. But anyway, so jumping into our next super chat, this one goes to Marion Deemer, who puts in a $30 support. And thank you very much, Marion, for that support as always. They said, if you follow Israel, you are lost.
Well, I mean, like follow Israel is like support him.
I guess so, possibly. I'm not sure.
Let's see. I would say we don't. I mean, like, Israel is an ally of the United States, but we put American priorities over Israeli priorities every day of the week. So I thank you for the support. But with that, we're on the next one.
And our next one here goes to Coca-Cola Mandate, who puts in a 25. And thank you very much, Coca-Cola Mandate, for that support. They said Europe is the architecture of the past, and Israel is the argument about the future. And Europe shows what civilization built, and Israel shows what it will defend. And confusing the two preserves structure but loses meaning.
I think that's trying to prescribe like a symbolic or philosophical sort of an attachment to our alliances, and our alliances are purely utilitarian. The Israelis are an ally of the United States because we want an ally in the region that will fight Iran with us. Europe is an ally because we have significant economic relations with them, so it's beneficial to have a military alliance with them and also further defend against the Russian Federation. So I would have to say that in my honest opinion, I wouldn't really prescribe that sort of a thing to it because we don't really care what the Israelis have in their country, and we really don't care what the Europeans have in their country. We just care entirely about trying to defend ourselves and our economic interests in the present day, here and now, because it's a cool thing, you know, sure, that Europe built a castle, you know, like Britain built a castle in England 600 years ago, but that's not the reason why we're an ally with them. The reason why we're an ally with the United Kingdom is because they are a significant trading partner of the United States, and they also are a country that will help us to fight the Russian Federation if it ever came down to it. The reason why we're an ally with Israel is really not economical because they're not even economically significant. They have a GDP about equivalent to the state of Utah's. The reason why we're an ally of Israel's is because they generally will fight Iran with us quite easily compared to really everyone else in the region, and that's really the main reason why we're an ally. Also, they fight two of the largest terrorist groups that Iran supports, which is Hezbollah and Hamas, which also furthers the cause of the fight against the Islamic regime and its continued attempts to deteriorate and degrade the U.S. alliance and sphere of influence that we have within the area. So I thank you for the support, but I generally don't look at them that way because alliances are almost purely utilitarian, and trying to prescribe any like deeper philosophical meaning to them largely starts to remove the actual benefits and purpose of it, and more so puts it into like more of a framework of what we like opinion wise, of like, do you like European castles and medieval towns, or do you like modern Israeli cities like Tel Aviv? And you know, that really is not what we make alliances and break them over. But a big thanks to you for support and helping the channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, by the way, I have found a, looks like a breaking news piece of news right here. It looks like the Iran-backed Houthis has likely launched a missile at Israel, which means they've officially joined the war if that turns out to be true. We are seeing that sirens are currently sounding across southern Israel, apparently due to a launch allegedly from Yemen. So if it's true, that means the Houthis are now involved, which means they're likely going to close the strait pretty soon after this, which is obviously not a good sign. So if you answered on the poll earlier, there that's pretty much guaranteed the Houthis are going to get involved, well, you just won the jackpot, which is just nothing but you won. But anyways, Enforcer, what say you?
And that's quite interesting to hear, and it does appear that the Houthis, at least at a minimum, are firing at Israel right now. They have done this in the past a decent amount of times. Might not be showing that they're going to close the Bab El-Mendeb, but it might also be as well. So we'll generally have to keep an eye on that one and see if we get any further developments on it. So big thanks to you once again for breaking that news, Mandy, and also to everyone else in the chat that let us know about that. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a $28 support from none other than Duncan VR, all the way down from Australia, down there where they just bought some emergency fuel. Duncan, hoard the fuel.
Hey!
But thank you very much for the support. He said, Bamu Wolf Quack. Sir, did you see any marmots on the climb today, sir? Sir, let's bring out that marmot. Bye-bye.
You know, to be entirely honest with you, we didn't, but we got kind of close. In reality, we saw one of these. A Utah
We saw Bad Rabbit. We saw him. He wasn't singing, but he was hanging out. They saw him there. He said, sir, that Bad Rabbit, sir. Wow, this voice is not doing me right tonight. I feel like it's scratching my throat. It's really, I tell you, it's not a good thing. It's not a good thing.
We were walking down the mountain, big, beautiful mountain, one of the biggest. It's the tallest in the region by far. We climbed it like pros, absolute pros. We could take on Everest with no problem at all. And when we were going down the mountain, I sat there and heard, yes, I have many girlfriends. Yes, I have many girlfriends. Auntie asked me why I have so many girlfriends because I take them to the VIP, And I was like, oh my God, it's a rabbit. It's a bad bunny. Look at it. It's a bad one. Look at it. It's got a little, like, gimp leg right there. Look at it. Crazy rabbit. But beyond that, we actually did see one of these. And so, I consider us blessed. And it was so funny, folks, because it was like rustling in the bushes, and Matthew was like, what is that? And then it like, literally, once he said that and like gave it like 2 seconds, it literally just hopped out one hop into plain view for us to see it, and then we're like, oh, look, it's a rabbit. We were like, oh my God, look at that, crazy. I mean, you know, like rabbits.
I thought it was a big snake. A rattler. That's what I thought it was. They said, sir, a rattler. You got to look out for those, sir. You can't step on it. Don't step on snake. That's what they say, sir. Don't step on snake. You don't want to step on those. That's not a good thing when you step on those. It turns out that they don't like it too much. They don't like it. They get nasty. They turn around and they bite back. Yeah. Oh, man, they bite back so hard. You got to be careful with those rattlers.
This is definitely the one we saw. It was a mountain cottontail. Look at that cute little creature. Look at it, Matthew. It's beautiful. It's a cute little rabbit. Look at it.
That's such a cute creature. It'd make a nice stew. Put him in a stew. They said, sir, they used to do that back in the day. You know, they call me something of a history major scholar. That's what they call him, a scholar. Someone who knows everything. That describes me very well. They should call me Scholar Supreme. They said back in the day they used to put him in stew. Sir, they put him in the stew, mix him up, put him in some water, turn it on broil, leave it to simmer. That's what they said, sir.
You know, I used to run over black bears on the interstate, and I dropped them off in Central Park.
Crazy Bobby, you gotta love Bobby. He says the craziest shit, but we gotta have him around.
For something, like, I guess, I don't know. But beyond that, oh, hello there. Hey!
Hello there. How you doing? Wait, hold on. You can take it over from here. I gotta catch my breath.
Oh, hello there, Governor. I have to say that we greatly appreciate you, Duncan VR, for letting us see your moment on the climb. I mean, a rabbit's kind of close, right? You know, it's basically the same thing. It's redentia, and it's a wonderful thing. Oh, man, I gotta tell you, I never go out into nature. Oh, man, it's really something right there. Oh, man.
Oi, Governor, you gotta really tell him to go out in the nature, Governor. You gotta send him out there with the birds and the eagles and stuff and oil. You gotta keep an eye out for him, they say, sir. They say, go out there and, you know, they say, sir.
No, I don't know what they say. What do they say? Like, you just said a whole bunch of stuff.
I'm still trying to recover.
He's trying to recover. Heavens. But beyond that though, a massive thanks to you for the support, Duncan VR. I hope you enjoyed Alan the Marmot and Fly. It's always a great traditional segment of this channel. We thank you massively for supporting the channel as well, Duncan, and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
Someone said, "What the hell is going on in here, man? I thought this was the news." Well, it turns out that occasionally, from time to time, in an effort to cope with all this negativity in the headlines these days, sometimes there's brief moments of insanity. Some call it catharsis, if you're really philosophical. There's always a little moment of what's this, like, pent up insanity that comes out occasionally. Sometimes it manifests as marmot. Sometimes it manifests as people that are slightly more orange than the rest of us, and sometimes it manifests in people that enjoy putting wildlife in their trunk on the weekend. You never can tell who you're gonna get. But anyway, so our next one here goes to none other than Two Shoes. Two Shoes, thank you very much for that $20 support. They said this is dedicated to the heroes that put the timestamp in the comments the following day, and thank you for the service.
And I thank them for the service as well, Two Shoes, because it allows people to skip the intro. But we have to have the intro. We have to have the intro, folks. I know some people are like, why do we have to have it? It's so that way we can get the whole stream ready to go. There's a couple of things that we have to do when the stream's getting up and running, behind the scenes that we can't do because we would be live on air otherwise. And also on top of that, it allows us a moment, at least me and Matthew a moment, to be able to say hello to everyone who's coming in and joining us. And that's why it's there every single day. I've shortened it down, but also, folks, I got to say this. People are like extra sensitive when it comes to the intro because I've messed around with it here and there. It used to be 14 minutes long. And people complained about that. So then I cut it almost in half, and now it's 8 minutes long, and people complain about that. And then we even cut it down at some points because I just wanted to figure out how much people were going to complain, to 2 minutes and 30 seconds. And y'all wouldn't believe it. The number of complaints, no matter the length, whether it's 14 minutes, 8, or 2 minutes and 30 seconds, were literally the same amount every time. So then I just settled with 8. So,
You know, for the people that go berserk about the whole thing about the intro, that's our way to like prepare for the stream, by the way. And also, it's a patriotic intro. For the people that hate it so much they go berserk, you know what they call the intro?
What do they call it?
They call the outro.
Oh, that was a good one. That was actually a good one. Oh my god, dude!
Ask them out of here after that once they go crazy and like, you stupid idiots playing the American song. Gotta go.
You know what's crazy, folks, and this is something that we've noticed as well. Back when it was like Ukrainian music, hardly any complaints. Once I turned it into generally like an American intro, tons of complaints, like all the time. And I'm like I don't know if people know this, but I criticize what we do, like, as the United States, because I care for the United States and I wanted to do better and I wanted to be the best. And my pride in the country is reflected in the intro, because the intro is literally entirely my brainchild, how it exists right now. Like, I was the one completely in charge of making that and doing it and implementing it. And then no matter what, it's like insanity to me. Like, there is a crowd of people who just complain about it no matter what. It literally doesn't matter how long it is. And also, folks, that's why whenever anyone says, can you shorten down the intro, the answer is no these days, because it doesn't matter. Like, it could be 2 minutes long and people are still going to complain about it, and we have to have an intro just for the mechanics sake of running things in the background here on the channel. We have to set up a whole bunch of stuff before we actually start talking live on air. So that's why it's always going to be 8 minutes long. But I do give a shout out to all of those viewers who do put down the timestamp down there in the chat, so people can skip it after the show, because I know that everyone doesn't want to watch that every day, especially when it's not a live stream and it's a video, and I appreciate them for that as well. And so a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, and a huge thanks to you once again for being a supporter of this channel and helping us to keep this thing running. Oh heavens! Don't do it. I got it. Man, like, it's so stupid. Like these people who are saying this
it's hurting other people's brains. It's hurting other people's brains that want to hear the questions and stuff.
But the people who are saying this stuff, it's like they were complaining about the United States left and right in the last administration. Now this one is supposed to be perfect. I mean, I'm going to have complaints no matter what. Like, if you're expecting me to just whitewash something and act like some guy's perfect, you're on the wrong channel. You're on the wrong one. That's never going to happen. Like, we are going to criticize everybody, no matter who they are and what party they're from. Get with it, people. Stop being snowflakes. Anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
So our next one goes to Arar983, who puts in a 20. And thank you very much, Arar, for that support. They said half pepperoni, half ham, and pineapple pizza fund in LSA.
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you so much for giving us A pineapple pizza. You know, pineapple pizza isn't too bad. I know some people are really opinionated about it, like they either act like that's the only pizza or it's heresy. I mean, honestly, it's not too bad. But I'll tell you something that we did have today, folks. Something absolutely exquisite. When we got off of that mountain, just 2 miles down the street, was this place called Neaters. And we got BLTs from Neaters. And Matthew can tell y'all, that was a fire BLT.
Yeah, it was pretty good, I will say.
It was amazing. It was truly incredible. And I got to thank you so much for the support. Because not only are you helping us to have a pizza, Aurora, every once in a while, you're helping us to have a BLT, which is very tasty. And a big thanks to you so much once again. And we are on to the next one.
So we also have a 20 from Zyper Sniper, and thank you everyone Zyper for that $20 support. They said coffee fun for the enforcers, and it's good to be back, and it's also good to have you back. He said, I've been away traveling in Sweden, Denmark, and Germany just because, and I haven't traveled outside my country in about 10 years, so it was refreshing to travel again.
I gotta say, I bet you had a lot of fun. That sounds like it'd be a very, very fun trip to go to Sweden, Denmark, and Germany. You know, I want to try and travel around Europe at some point in the future. I find the whole of Europe to be quite interesting. Like Britain, for example. And then, you know, there's the rest. I'm just playing, by the way. Like, I have to say, Germany would be a very cool place to go, along with the Scandinavian countries, like Denmark, Norway, and Sweden. I would love to go to those places. It's just, sadly, while we're running this channel, we will never have the time, because it will take a long time to get over there, like, you know, even on a plane. And then because of that and the cost of it, you then have to kind of, like, spend a good amount of time, at least a week over there to get the bang for the buck. And, you know...
You don't have a problem with that. You won't have a problem with that at all. When you go on the European tour of duty, you'll have plenty of time. You'll have several months.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, you're right. And then I'll say, hey, what's that whirring noise? And that's an FPV drone. It's like, uh-oh. But beyond that, I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running Zyper Sniper. And I have to say that while we can't really travel around a lot, we are very lucky to have moved to Salt Lake. There's so much to see and do here that you really don't run out of stuff to do here in Salt Lake City. We kind of ran out of stuff to do in Birmingham because there isn't really a lot to do in Birmingham. There's really not a lot to do in Alabama, sadly. But here in Salt Lake, there's plenty to do and plenty to see all within the city. They basically have it all self-contained in here, which is really nice. And also, I keep joking with Matthew, it's like a video game map, because here's the funny thing. Let me drop y'all back down on that mountain down here again to show y'all this, because I find this to just be hilarious. But it's like a video game map, because there are no roads that leave the city through these mountain ranges here to the west or the east. There's Interstate 15 that goes down to Provo, which is really the only way out of the city to the south. And then there's Interstate 15 to the north heading to Ogden, and that's really the only way out of the city to the north. Outside of that, you're basically stuck in a big video game map, which is just the city. And then there's some outdoor stuff on the mountains surrounding it in the bowl. But then there's no other way really to get out. There is one other way, though, I do have to mention, folks. There is Interstate 80 that goes kind of like towards Park City. But to be entirely upfront with you all, it's like an hour and a half away, no matter what. So it's really hard to even find the time to drive 3 hours round trip out there and then back. So basically kind of stuck in Salt Lake, but it's a great place to be stuck in. I mean, you know, it's really nice, and the food's good, and the people are nice, and the scenery's great. You know, you got tons to do. So a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, also, I see someone saying that a certain Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is going to be ousted soon. What, did they announce a snap election or something over there?
No, I don't think so.
Well, let me see here. Oh, let's see. I don't see anything about that, so I think that's more so of an opinion thing. I thought that they finally declared a snap election or something. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 20 from Walter P. And thank you very much, Walter, for that 20. He said, would you put it past the Iranians to have command and control bunkers in the nuclear reactor site? They use hospitals and mosques and schools, too. And I wouldn't put that past them, certainly not. You can't put anything past the Iranians. Like, that's the whole thing with terrorist governments like that. You can't put anything past them. If that's the whole point of them. If there's something extreme that they can do, they likely have done it, or they will do it. There's literally no boundaries, but, you know, we don't know for certain. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say I wouldn't doubt that either, but that still doesn't justify us hitting a nuclear reactor and basically irradiating everyone's drinking water in the Middle East to just try and get one command bunker. Like, we can win the war without having to blow up a nuclear reactor just to get the command bunker that might be underneath it. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep running, and I hope that does address that well. And I also saw someone say, but the Mormons, a former Mormon speaking. Honestly, I mean, I haven't run into any, like, Mormons in large numbers, and when I do, they're pretty nice. I mean, like, I will say this, though, the missionaries do not take no for an answer. Like, that's one thing that I will say is kind of a little annoying, is like, if you're like, oh, no, I'm good, they'll be like, oh, well, how about we reschedule the time? It's like, no, it's like, I'm good. I don't want to, like, become a part of your faith. Like, I respect you all.
Oh, and they come back.
Like, yeah, they'll try and come back if they can. Like generally they're kind of like taught before they do their whole mission thing that you really can't take no for an answer, and no just means they're not ready. But if you try enough, eventually someone will accept the faith and be ready to take it on. That's kind of like what they're told. And it's like, like no means no. It's like, if you don't want to become one, you're not going to become one. It's like, for example, if you come up to me and you're like, hey, would you like to be an atheist or, or part of Islam or a Jew or something? I'm going to be like, no, I'm generally okay. Like, I'm fine who I am, and it's like that no is a no. It's like, I just don't want to. It's like, if I'm interested after that, I'll seek it out. But, coming around and just trying to like, be like, oh, are you ready now? It's like, no, it's like, now you're really making it clear I don't want to be a part of this because y'all don't take no for an answer. So, that's something a little interesting. Outside of that, though, I really don't have any complaints about them. They are very civic minded. I respect that greatly about them. I think that's something that a lot of Americans should emulate, is the civic mindedness that the Mormons have. They're very nice folks. Publicly, like, I don't know what goes on in their houses and their private lives, but publicly they keep up a very good atmosphere, and they're very nice people. And what more could you ask as far as having a casual social interaction with someone in the public, is being generally a model citizen. And I would say that most members of the LDS, in my definition, would generally fall along the lines of being a model citizen, in having good manners and generally being quite pleasant to be around in the public. But anyways, with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 20 from the Oda Might, and thank you very much for that support. They said, love your show, guys, and I think I watch almost every night now, and keep up the great work. However, one pet peeve as former military is hearing you guys say MEU, when my whole career we said MeU, but y'all do, or but y'all do, y'all do, I think you meant to say. But also, by the way, I just say it out the textbook. I just say it out the textbook way. I don't know the lingo, sadly, right there, but thank you very much for the kind words. And Enforcer, what say you?
I thank you for the support, and yeah, it's like, I screw up a lot of words. That's one that we've been told about before, actually. Like Oda, we've actually been told before it's a MEU, basically, or a MEU. And I keep on calling it an MEU because I'm kind of used to Army terminology where they call their equivalent of a MEU or an MEU a BCT, and there's really no way to like make that one sound neat, like a MEU or a MEU or something like that. It's just BCT. So then I take that like understanding, because that's like as far as ground forces go, the Army is the one that I kind of focus on the most. So then I just use that on the Marines, and I'm like an MEU, although that is technically incorrect. I really need to fix that and try and change that. But don't hold me to it, because sadly, whenever I mispronounce something, it's usually mispronounced for the rest of my life, sadly. It's really hard for me to change a bad habit once I get it. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, Oda. And a big thanks to you for letting us know that. And thank you so much for the kind words and enjoying the channel as well. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
I will say I see a lot of people talking about Mormonism in the chat. The weird thing is I've met more non-Mormons or ex-Mormons out here than I have actual Mormons. Like, I don't think I've met an actual Mormon in person yet. They have knocked on my door though, but I didn't know really how to like address them or deal with them, to be honest. Because I generally know they won't take no for an answer. Because I actually knew a fellow that was Mormon in high school back in Alabama, and generally they don't take no for an answer. I didn't know that, so I just didn't answer the door because I don't want to be rude. I'm not trying to be nasty or something like that just because somebody's knocking at the door. So I just simply didn't answer the door because I didn't want to have to get in that situation. But it's weird though. I haven't really met like a legit Mormon out here. I've seen them, but I've met a lot of ex-Mormons, and they all had like kind of horror stories, to be honest, for the most part. And me personally, I'm like, I could really care less. I'm like, if somebody wants to be a Mormon, they can be a Mormon. Me personally, I won't ever be a Mormon personally, but it's a free country. So as long as people are nice, that's all I ask. Like, if people are nice and just leave it at that, that, that's pretty much it. For the most part. And me personally, I'll just be straight up. I'm not a person that has a whole bunch of friends, to be honest. I've never been that way. So, you know, I generally have a lot of acquaintances. I have a handful of close friends, and then the rest of my life is pretty much about work. That's the way I like to have it for the most part. That's the way I find satisfaction. And also, it's nice to have a nice place to get out and go hiking as well. That's a huge plus as well. But that's just me personally.
Yeah, I mean, you know, as far as it goes, folks, because I know like a lot of people are always like, well, they're weird. It's like, well, yeah, but a lot of religious people are weird. I mean, like even speaking from our own personal experience in the South, we kind of come from a background like that wasn't Pentecostal, but it kind of leaned that way. So like some of the weirdness that comes with Pentecostal people, like the whole snake charming thing, which we never saw in person, but many of our family members had dealt with growing up, and then like the whole speaking in tongues thing, which, you know, like I'm not dissing on it, but at the same time, like every time I heard it, like they certainly weren't speaking Hebrew or anything. It was just whatever noises they came up with. You know, and that sort of stuff. And that's weird. You know, but it's like if those people want to be of that specific sect of the Christian faith, who am I to judge them? I don't live with them. You know, like they do what they do, and whatever they want to do within the confines of their own home or whatever place of worship they go to, that's their business between them and God, or whatever God they believe in, or the lack of God that they believe in. As far as I go, all I care about is how I do things. And so while the Mormons, like looking at them from the outside, you know, I don't really get a lot of their theology. If they believe in it and that's what keeps them going every day, I mean, all power to them. You know, it's a free country. There's freedom of religion here. And much like I have the freedom to believe what I want to believe, they have the freedom to believe whatever they want to believe as well. And so I generally don't try and dwell too much into it. As far as public life, though, as long as it go, like here's how I view it for the nation's sake. I don't really care what they believe as long as it doesn't lead them to being a nasty person in public, and it encourages them to be a model citizen and a nice person to people that they pass by in public, because you're not going to deal with them any further than that. That's really all I care about. And the Mormons are, you know, some of the nicest people that you can deal with in the public. I mean, they're never mean to really anybody. They're always trying to be as nice as possible, you know, for whatever aims or purposes that may have, or just for the fact of their theological doctrine. And for that matter, they're model citizens to me. And not only that, they care a lot about keeping up a place, like keeping it clean, keeping it nice, trying to look out for civil utilities and facilities, which is definitely civic minded, which is something else that I think is something that should be emulated by many Americans, is to have the kind of civic mindedness that the Mormons have around here in Salt Lake. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 20 from Mike, and thank you very much, Mike, for that $20 support right there. I don't see a comment attached with it, but of course, we do appreciate the support because it does help to keep the channel running as well. And we also have a 20 from Miss Paula Thomas, who said, ironically, the Strait of Hormuz is the one place where Ukrainian drone assistance would be the most useful. And for instance, sub-sea babies destroying mines, and FPV drones finding and destroying cave anti-ship missile sites. Now, one thing that is true, by the way, I do agree with that. But one thing that people haven't really heard about yet is the U.S. has deployed their own domestically produced drone boat, but it's not the same thing as like a Sea Baby that's meant to be an attack drone. It's more of a surveillance vessel, and we've deployed, I believe, a handful of them in the Strait, and I haven't really heard the outcome of what happened to them. They might still be running surveillance, or they might have been shot at by the Iranians. I simply don't know what happened to them. But it would be good, though, to use the Ukrainians in this situation and let them teach us how to use those drones, because if we get into a larger war, that would be invaluable information. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I would have to definitely agree with that. Drone warfare from the Ukrainian side would be massively beneficial, really in almost every way, against the Iranians. And I wish that we would employ and request their assistance a lot more here in the States, because that would definitely be a lot more helpful to us than it would be hurtful. But it'd be huge thanks to you for the support and help this channel to keep it running. And I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 20 from Vector, and thank you, Vector, for that $20 support. They said, is this not a major incentive for democracies to work together and become energy independent, using all possible advancements in energy production? And glad you are still going to never stop. XO.
Hey, and thank you so much for your support. And generally, yes, but the problem is that we still have to secure the fuel of tomorrow for today. And that's kind of the issue that we're dealing with right now, is that we need to see that oil flows. But I think that after this war starts to settle down and we get control of the situation and the Hormuz, we really need to start talking amongst our sphere of we really need to become energy independent from fossil fuel resources because this is a major strategic obstacle that we have. And I mean, who can deny that at this point with how things are going? The Iranians close the Strait of Hormuz, and the entire Western economic sphere starts to crumble. And that is a huge strategic issue. And if we could try and move away from being largely dependent on fossil fuels for most transportation, that would be great. I mean, that would probably be the best sort of a recourse that we could have, because if we do that, one, we generally get around the fact that in about 40 to 50 years, most oil reserves in the world are going to start running out. Secondly, we also get around, and also, by the way, I know a lot of people are going to be like, there's tons of oil. There's a huge rabbit hole as to why that doesn't really work out in reality. But anyways, secondly, we're also energy independent. And so then if, like, for example, if the Iranians close the Strait of Hormuz, we're like, oh, that's a shame. And then everybody in the Western world just keeps going about things like nothing's happened at all, because we're not relying on oil coming out of the Middle East to keep our sphere of influence and our economies running. So I generally agree with you. I think that would be a big thing to move towards, and I would hope that when they do that, they don't go, let's do wind farms and solar farms. It's like, that would be ridiculous. It's like they need to start funding the research into nuclear fusion a whole lot more, because that is truly the energy of the future. It's practically an unlimited energy resource compared to even nuclear fission. Much more than the renewable power sources like they talk about, like wind and solar, and it would be able to provide not only for the electricity demands and needs of today, but for largely all of our energy demands in the future for whatever sorts of pursuits or needs we would have at that point. So I would hope that they would start moving in that direction more so than anything else. We won't ever be able to completely phase out fuel, just like coal. Like we never completely phased out coal when we brought oil into being, but we'll be a lot less dependent on it, and for that reason, there will be a lot less economic damage to result if something like this happens again. And so a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And also, we have a 20 from Jesusium, who put in a 20 and said, early on in the Russia-Ukraine war, many videos of Russians surrendering to Ukraine, and Ukraine even dropped a guy some cigarettes by drone for surrendering. And why aren't these guys surrendering before the drone hits?
Generally, threat of execution by other Russian forces stops a decent amount of Russians from surrendering these days. And also, it's the fact that both sides have become fairly radicalized, if we want to put it that way, against each other, leads them to surrender a lot less these days. So that's generally the reason why, those two reasons are the reason why we don't see as many of them surrendering now as we did back then. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running, and I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And also, we have a super chat here from none other than Fred Vreeman. And thank you, Fred, for that $20 support as well. And let's see. I'm going to check on something here in just a second, but thank you very much, Fred, for that 20. He said, the Bab El-Mendeb Strait is just pitifully fortified. It should be easy to protect, and the coalition taking over the Persian Gulf will have an easy time taking over Mayun and Marab, and besides, the real Yemenis will support them.
And I would generally agree with that. The Houthis never put up a lot of resistance last time. Once we parked a couple of destroyers inside of the Bab El-Mendeb, most of the situation dissipated pretty quickly, and we were able to defend most of the ships that were going through the area. So I'd actually agree with you on that one, Fred Freeman, absolutely. I think that that would generally be a much easier situation to deal with than what the Iranians are doing right now. The Iranians are doing the same thing the Houthis would do, just at a larger and more armed scale, meaning that that one's a little bit of a tougher nut to crack. But with the Houthis, it would be pretty easy, in my honest opinion, because we saw that it was easy in the past two times, but I think that we should try this time around to ensure that the Houthis don't exist for this to ever even happen another time after this one. So big thanks to you for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on and into the next one.
And we also have a $20 super chat from William. And thank you very much, William, for that 20. He said, have a look at the global radiation map and explain what's happening in Clintonville, Ohio.
In Ohio? Excuse me, do you have yachts in Ohio? Let's see. I don't see anything happening in Ohio. The radiation appears to be background levels in this area. Take a look at that. Background levels across the board. Well, except for here. There is a little bit of a... Oh, there's a little bit of a spike around here. What's going on in Detroit? Oh, actually, sorry, that's not Detroit. That's north of Detroit. Well, let's see what... Oh! Colorado's got some, radiation.
Oh, how are you, wait a minute, how are you saying that?
How am I saying that? With English.
I don't see any radiation anywhere on the map.
It's a heat map, Matthew. It's a heat map.
Oh.
See this blackness right there. That's the lowest amount of radiation, and then the higher up you get, it starts getting to like a white color, and that's really high radiation. And here they have about 0.23 millisieverts throughout most of Colorado. What's up with that?
Oh no, I mean, what's happening?
I don't know. I don't know. The whole of the Rockies is irradiated. I'm just kidding, by the way. It's not like highly irradiated, it's just like slightly higher than normal. But that is interesting, though. And then over here in Salt Lake, it is smooth and clean. Nice. Now let's go. Oh. What's going on down here? Oh, nothing really. Well, let's take a look around the rest of the world. Something going on down here in Ghana. That's interesting. And anything going on up in Europa? Well, not really. There is high radiation here in Chernobyl, however. Some of the highest amounts seen.
I wonder why.
I wonder. Nothing out of Russia.
Seems like something might have happened there. What do we have here?
Well. What do we have here? And then over here in Japan, you can see where Fukushima's at, which also has exceptionally high amounts of radiation.
Wow, now that is actually pretty bad. I heard that it's still like a big deal to go there. Like there's still an exclusion zone and stuff like that. So apparently it's still pretty ugly.
Oh yeah, this is just like Chernobyl a few years on, basically, down here at Fukushima. Let me see where that is again. Let's see, where is that on the coast? So that's right there. So I need to go right here. We'll know it when we see it. We'll know it when we see it. Oh, let's see here. We're getting close. Here it is! And all of the water tanks that they have of irradiated tritium-filled water that they can't put anywhere, so they just store it in these tanks at the power plant. But this is it. This is basically the Chernobyl of Japan. If only they had put those emergency reactors, Matthew, and on this hill right over here instead of in the basement of the reactor halls, because the Japanese Atomic Advisory Agency that does the inspections of the plants said, hey, your breakwater wall isn't high enough and far out enough, and secondly, your generators are inside of the basement, so if a tsunami hits, it's going to flood right over the tide walls, and it's going to go right into the basements and short out those reactors. And the company that ran the power plant went, oh, that's interesting, and then they never fixed it. So when the tsunami hit, it went right over the tide wall, right into the basements of the reactor halls, and then shorted out all the generators, which is what led all of them to run wild and then melt down. So that's what happened.
Wow, that's a bad thing, of course.
Yeah, it's interesting because like everything's dead out here, just like it is back in the day in Chernobyl. We can go through here? Oh, this was before. Well, actually, this was after the nuclear incident, because this is in 2015. Man, Google is sending someone through here and giving them some rads. I hope they use rad away after driving around here.
The U.S. should really go over there and fix Fukushima for Japan. We're obligated to fix that.
Why?
I'm not joking. I'm just trying to get people triggered. That's all I was doing. Somebody might say, what's wrong with you? You said support NATO and you said go fix Fukushima. You bastard.
You're a globalist or something like that. It's like, oh, God. Oh, man. But I forgot, man. We have to say it. We have to say it. America is going to be first. And then it's like, okay, how's that working? Like by its original definition, not really working. But anyways, with that, it is time for us to move on into the next one. But a big thanks to you for support.
Yes, indeed. And moving into our next one here, this one's going to go to Ross Nibb, who put in a 20. And thank you, Ross, for that $20 support. He said, for the Pizza Sub Fund.
And thank you so much for the Pizza Sub Fund. We do appreciate pizzas and submarines. And we thank you greatly for your support at helping this channel to keep on running. And a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here is going to go to Chef Danny B once again. And he throws in a $50 support. And thank you very much, Danny, for that second support of the night. And we do appreciate that right there. He said, Chef Danny again. And what? He said, radiation in Colorado. Does that mean I'm going to turn into like Ninja Turtle or something? JK. And last year, I did a 14,000 feet. And it took us about 6.5 hours. An LLT, LSA. 14. Dang. I mean, you're saying 14,000 feet of elevation? Is that what he's saying?
14,000 foot tall mountain.
Well, damn, son. Damn. Yeah, I think you're in better shape than me, Danny, because I'm not sure if I could pull that off right now.
Man, I'm telling you, Chef Danny B, we went up that hill today. I mean, it's kind of like a mountain, but more of a hill, really. It's a 500-foot tall. For Alabama, this technically is actually a mountain right here, because people would call elevation features of this size a mountain. So to us, this is like a mountain. And when we went up this today, we were both coming back down it, and we were like, damn, man, we're beat. And then you're like, I did a 14,000 footer, and that's 2,000 feet taller than that one over there. That's the Lone Peak. Honestly, that's crazy right there, Chef Danny B. You got to be in top physical shape because we were absolutely getting beat on that 500-foot hill, really, or mountain. I like to call it a mountain. It makes it seem just a little bit better. Like it doesn't make it seem like we're wildly out of shape. It just makes it seem like we're slightly out of shape. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And what 14,000 footer was that? By the way, Chef Danny B, I'm interested in that. Was it Apache Peak? Is this 14,000 feet? I don't know, but the view up here is incredible.
I'll say Colorado's got some nice scenery going on too, like in their mountains. It's just that Colorado is more expensive to live there than Utah, at least from what I could tell. Like, for example, if you want to live outside of Denver, like in Fort Collins or something like that, which I think that's considered a pretty nice area, like outside of Denver, it gets a lot steeper than Salt Lake City. It starts getting very expensive, and also generally it's like it's nice, but unless you like drive into the mountains, you're not really in the mountains until you drive into it. A lot of people think that Denver is mountainous, but it's really flat.
Let's see here. Oh, Matthew, look, they have the same like tracks trains like on the blue line here in Colorado. That's crazy. I didn't know
Oh
that.
yeah, they
Um,
sure do.
but there is the city, and then there's the mountains way off back there, and then Salt Lake City's like in nestled in the mountains. So there's mountains everywhere. And a lot of people are always like, man, Colorado, like Denver, they always say it was a mountain city, and I think downtown Denver to the mountains is like to the foothills is about 13 miles or so. And if we're talking about like the super big mountains over here, those are like 30 miles away and 40 miles away. And then in Salt Lake City, if we measure from the downtown to like the tall mountains nearby, downtown Salt Lake City is, let's see, this is a fairly tall one right here, about 7 miles away, and then it's surrounded by them. So a lot more mountaining stuff to do really close nearby to Salt Lake, more so than Denver. It's like a little bit farther away. But I gotta say, that is crazy right there. And I want to get up a mountain one day like that. It's just, I gotta get in some physical shape. Sitting around doing this all day in a chair at a computer does not do us any favors at all for physical fitness, sadly. So we need to get in shape so we can go up the Lone Peak.
Also, Danny B said Mount Elbert was the one that I did. So where's that one at?
Mount Elbert. How do you spell that?
Yeah, Mtelbert.
Oh, this one. This one right here.
Is it?
Dang!
Where is it at? I can't see it.
You can. It's right here. It's right here.
Oh, Discord's screwing up, man. Discord's screwing up.
Oh no! Let me fix that, everyone. Let me fix that. It's not doing us well. It's giving out. It was doing so well the whole stream. It's decided to give up. Now let's end that task and let's restart it. Any minute now. Any minute. And let's go to Matthew here and then join that call and let's screen share again and there it is right here, Matthew. It's right here.
I see now. Now that looks like a challenge right there.
That does look like a challenge. I guess this is the view from the peak.
That is a hell of an elevation right there, honestly. It's a lot more wide open.
It is a lot more wide open, like a load. Let's see here. It's very nice looking up there. But that is crazy. 14,000 feet. What's the elevation? Let me type in that mountain. What's the elevation from base to peak? Mount Elbert. Let's see. It's the highest summit of the Rocky Mountains of North America. Oh, so that is the tallest mountain, basically, except for Mount McKinley in all of North America at that point.
Damn, so that's the one that Danny went up?
Yeah, that's the one he went up. So let's see.
Jeez.
It's the highest point in the U.S. state of Colorado, second highest summit in the contiguous in the United States, second only to Mount McKinley, which is 22,000 feet tall. Let's see. Oh, wait, hang on. Oh, wait a minute. Mount Whitney. which is in California, is just slightly taller, but slightly as in only 60 feet taller. But damn, dude, Mount Whitney looks crazy. Look at that.
Damn, look at that. Look at that.
That is in the Sierra Nevadas. But I want to find how tall this thing is from base to peak. Because the thing about it, folks, is that you don't have to do 14,000 feet of climbing, at least on some of the mountains, like out here, because the resting sea level, or more so ground level, is about 4,500 feet here in Salt Lake. So the base is at 4,500 feet, and then the peak is like at 12,000. So I want to see, let's see here. Let's see. All of which gain over, let's see. So starting from these 4.6 miles, gains about, so most of the trails heading up to the top are about 4,500 feet in vertical gain. I think most of the trails out here on the Lone Peak are about 7,000 feet, but there's one over here at Potato Hill, right here, that starts and goes up the side, and that's Jacob's Ladder. And I don't know how high that one is. Let's see. Jacob's Ladder, Lone Peak, vertical gain. So that, so that's interesting, because this mountain is actually a good bit taller by like 2,000 feet of Lone Peak. But what's interesting about it is that the trails are actually shorter in vertical gain, because the shortest one, the Lone Peak, is actually 5,500 feet of vertical gain versus 4,400 feet for this one. So that's actually really interesting right there. I didn't know that. But we actually apparently have breaking news coming out at this moment. Matthew, what do we have?
Okay, so this relates to the missile that was fired from Yemen at Israel. It looks like some oil tankers that are passing through the Bab El-Mendeb Strait, which is the Red Sea Strait. It looks like ships are starting to panic. They're getting worried that maybe the Houthis are going to start targeting ships. And we're seeing right now that apparently what appears to be possibly dozens of tankers have rerouted to a Saudi Arabian oil port, and they are not transiting through the strait. So I can't tell if maybe there's been a credible threat toward these ships or something, but you can see it there on the Twitter post, by the way, if you're pulling that up or not. I can't tell. There it is right there. So apparently a lot of ships are freaking out and they're not going through the strait for the most part. And it looks like we could possibly see the Houthis start to attack ships, maybe so, but we haven't heard an official announcement of that yet. But they have fired a missile at Israel, which means generally they have joined the war for the most part. So that's pretty big news.
Huh. That's a little concerning. It looks like they might actually be closing the strait right now, folks. So, that's a little concerning. Hopefully that doesn't end up turning out too poorly. But we'll have to see how all of this ends up panning out in the future. But it does appear that we might be seeing them closing the strait of the Bab El-Mendeb right now. So I hope that does address that breaking news that's just come out. And also, by the way, folks, 42 minutes ago starts the end of, well, actually marks the end of the first full month of the war against Iran, and is now moving us on into the second month of the war against Iran. So there we go. 1 month down. How many more to go? We don't know. But I hope that does address that breaking news well, and getting us back to our mountain speak.
Man, I think this is a rabbit hole. I think we need to move on.
A rabbit hole, Matthew. I mean, we have plenty of time. We have plenty of time.
We have a lot more super chats to get to.
Well, it was an interesting topic while it lasted. I thank you so much for the support, Chef Danny B, and I hope that has addressed it somewhat well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 20 from Chris Feilbach, and thank you, Chris, for that $20 support as well. He said, yeah, well, and this is in his words, by the way. He said, my fat ass. That's what he said. I didn't say that about him, by the way. He said, I've been to 38,000 feet. I got both of you beat. Now, 38,000 feet, is that, you're not trying to, is that a plane? Like, are you talking about a plane right there? That sounds like a plane's altitude right there at 38,000 feet. I'm not totally sure, but Enforcer, what say you?
I see you climbed flight 3397 with American Airlines. Congratulations. It's a congratulations. The tallest vertical peak in the world is Mount Everest, I think at 36,000 feet above sea level. So this would be above the tallest peak, meaning it was an airplane. But at that point, if we're counting aircraft, Chris, we actually would have you beat, because the highest that we've ever been in an aircraft was 44,000 feet. And I think that was, if I'm remembering this right, I think it was a flight that I took to Seattle And I think for a while there, when they were going over the Rockies, the turbulence got really bad and they climbed up in altitude. And I actually had one of those little media display things in the back of the chair because it was like a long enough flight that they actually did that. And so I looked at it and it said that the plane's cruising altitude was 44,000 feet, which I was just like blown away by. I was like, oh my God, like this is the highest I've ever been. This is almost like going to space. It's not, by the way, but it is kind of close. And so I was like, wow, that's crazy. So, I mean, that's the highest I've ever been in a plane. But to be entirely honest with you, I'm not one for flying, so I don't really like. I don't consider that to be a point of pride to me. I would say that the highest point of pride I've ever had in transportation is that I spent 36 hours on the Coast Starlight from LA to Seattle, nonstop, never getting off the train until it made it to Seattle. That was probably the coolest thing that I've ever done transportation wise. But a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well, Chris. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $15 support from Crispy, and thank you very much, Crispy, for that 15, and we do appreciate that. I don't see a comment, but Crispy does leave that super chat support all the time, and we do appreciate that very, very much. We also have a 13 from Dumb Wabbits, who said, get a coalition together and control the Red Sea.
I would have to definitely agree with that one, Dumb Wabbits. I would say that we do need to see that that is done. And a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep it running. Also, hold up, folks. I gotta go pull this up. Mount Everest. Everest height. Oh, it's only 29,032 feet. That's not too bad, Matthew. That's just one lone peak stacked on top of another lone peak. I'm sure we can knock that out in an afternoon.
I'm going to go to the top of Mount Everest one day in a helicopter.
Man, I'm not gonna lie, folks, that like I've never had an appreciation for how hard this would be, because whenever I heard people go like, "Oh, I'm climbing Everest," I'm like, "What? Yeah, sure. Like that's a big deal. You got tons of Sherpas and stuff." I still think that would be wildly tough, even with Sherpas, even though you're not having to carry all of your gear. Just climbing like a vertical elevation that high for that long has to be extremely arduous, and I have a lot more respect for them now, and now that we've moved out here and we're actually in a state that has mountains and you can kind of like appreciate how tough it is to go up one. It's like, dang, it's like, that's actually a pretty impressive climb, because I think it's like 13,000 feet from base to summit, from like Camp 1 to the peak of Mount Everest. And that is a lot. I mean, that's literally taller than Lone Peak if you started at sea level and then went to the top, just from base to peak for Everest. That's crazy. But with that, I hope that does address it well. And actually, I saw someone bring up a cool fact about another mountain that's in the east, which is Mount Washington. And I have to tell Matthew this, because this is one that's crazy, Matthew. You're not going to believe this. The highest wind speed in the world was recorded on this mountain. How high do you think it was?
Probably about like 1,000 miles an hour.
It was 273 miles per hour.
That's crazy.
That's so strong that if you tried to stand on top of this mountain when that wind blew across it, it would literally blow you off, and you would basically go flying through the sky almost like an airplane. Not like that. Hey, yo!
Oh, wow.
Hey, yo! Like,
hey, yo, pause.
Man, hold up, man. What you mean by that? It's like, I don't mean that. Like, I don't mean that. But Mount Washington is the most dangerous mountain in America. Let me pull up the amount of people who've died on it. Mount Washington, MA deaths. Let's see here. Over 150 people have died on Mount Washington. So there you have it. This mountain right here. Let's see here. This is it. Yeah, this is it. Where the hell is the mountain, though? Well, where is it? Because it's windswept. You can see it. Like, where in the world is it? Hold up. Mount Washington. Well, it's somewhere in here. I can't figure out where it is because the top of it's windswept. There's nothing that grows up there. But 150 people have died on this mountain. To put this into perspective, Lone Peak, which is the one that's like the most prominent here in Utah, over the course of like 150 years of Western settlement or American settlement here in this valley, only 5 people have died on Lone Peak compared to over 150 on Mount Washington, which is wildly small, actually, if you ever see it in real life. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Chef Danny B once again. He puts in another 20. And thank you very much, Chef Danny, for the third support of the night. He said, Chef Danny again, and y'all actually might get into packing. My last backpacking trip was off-trail backpacking, 18 miles, 3-day trip, and my pack weighs about 40 pounds, and it's really fun.
And that sounds really fun. We tried that before, but I think we were underprepared and didn't really know what we were getting into. So both of us kind of had a negative experience about it. And also it was Alabama in the middle of the summer, so it was like 90 degrees and there was a thunderstorm and everything. It was not a fun time for us. But I would like to do that one day. It's just that sadly we got to find the time. But I would love to do that, and especially in the Rockies. That would be really cool. And so a huge thanks to you so much for the support. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Robert Krogan, and Robert said, "Good evening, enforcers and LSA, and not any intelligent questions today, but take one from the chat."
Oh, and I thank you for the support, Robert. And that's okay. You don't have to have a question every day, but we appreciate you for supporting the channel and helping the channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to take one from the live chat. So, Matthew, what do we got?
And the one from the live chat goes to Mopar, who said, "Where is the USS Lincoln now?"
The Lincoln is somewhere in the Arabian Sea, but getting any further detail than that would be impossible. So I hope that does address that live chat the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Sadato Hosoda, who said, "Shabbat Shalom."
And a big thanks to you for support, Sadato Hosada. And a big thanks to you once again for saying a big hello to us, and a big hello back to you. And a big thanks to you once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Mackenzie Barnett, and thank you very much for the support as well. They said, "Fell asleep watching y'all's show every night, and some reporters on YouTube are reporting that Israel took out Iran's nuclear power plant today. And is that actually true?"
No, they're getting two things confused. Someone bombed the Bushehr nuclear power plant today, but not the reactor. But then Israel went and bombed the IR-40 research reactor in Iraq. So if they're saying it's a power-producing reactor that was hit, they're wrong. If they're saying it's the research reactor in Iraq that got hit, they would be correct. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Game Theory, who said, "Nothing to say other than thank you, and you do the USA a service, keeping the public updated with the reality of the war."
Thank you so much for the support, Game Theory, and the kind words. And we try to do our best to keep everyone apprised of the situation and also get some common sense analysis out of what's going on. So a big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Diss Track who said, "CV Pesum Parabellum."
Hey, and thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from Dumb Wabbits yet again, and thank you very much, Dumb Wabbits, for the second support. There was no comment, though. I didn't see a comment attached right there on Dumb Wabbit Super Chat, but we do appreciate that very, very much. And we also have a 10 from Greenskin, who said, "Hello, Enforcers. Could you show the total roster of NATO without the U.S., manpower, planes, carriers, and tanks?" And the U.S. just announced that he really won't help Europe. And tired of people saying NATO is useless, and thanks for the news.
And one second, let me see if I can try and show this to y'all here really quickly. So, let's see here. Dang, this is a tough one. Because nobody ever compiles this all too well, or, like, wants to show it. And sadly, there's really no good infographics out there about this sort of a thing. So let me see. So this is about the best representation that we could give right here. And this is from probably, like, 2023, I would assume. But outside of that, though, the United States accounts for that much in personnel, and in terms of military spending, I believe that if we put together the whole of Europe, they spend like $800 to $700 billion a year on their combined armies and militaries. And the U.S. spends about $1 trillion right now, and it'll be up to 1.5, or it's expected to be next year, for that spending period. So, sadly, I can't really get a good breakdown, but to try and do the best I can, Europe is basically the only armed power in the world, unified one, that comes up to being about as powerful as the United States. China doesn't get close to what Europe has. Russia certainly doesn't get close to what Europe has in military power. The only people to match them would be us here in the United States. So generally, that's probably the best sort of an explanation I can give. And also I saw someone say, what about EU forces? Some countries that are in the EU are not in NATO. So that's the reason why I'm not doing that one, because Austria is in the EU and they're not a part of NATO. Neither is Ireland. And also I believe that there's a few other countries as well that would generally skew that figure to some degree. But well, let me actually see if I can get that, because that'd probably be the best. Let's see, EU military spending. So the EU, let's see here. The EU spends 400 billion euros, and let me see, 400 billion euros to USD. So they spend about $470 billion on their military every year. To put that into perspective, China spends about $300 billion on their military, and Russia, at the peak, the highest they ever have since the fall of the Soviet Union, is spending about $170 billion on their military every year. So to put that in perspective, like I was saying, Europe is the largest military power in the world outside of the United States in every way: personnel, aircraft, ships, spending, the whole kit and caboodle. They are the only ones who even come close to the United States of America, and that's why they're an incredibly valuable ally to have. And so with that, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a super chat here from Stinson, who put in a 20. And thank you very much, Stinson, Ben, for that support. He said, if the U.S. were to take an island, which would you think? Would it be Larak, Karg, or another?
I think it's going to be one within the Strait of Hormuz. It could be any of them, but I have a feeling they're probably going to go for a larger one like Qeshm, which will give them much more control of the physical area of the strait. So a big thanks to you for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 here from, or actually a 10 from Pookie. And thank you, Pookie, for that $10 support. They said, just sending some love, and hit that thumbs up, folks, and LOSA.
And LSA, and a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And please do hit the like button, folks. We love to see it. We really do. So we love to see it, you sees. And so a big thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Also, Grim Hades in a live chat said, Enforcer Matt, did the U.S. ever put out a statement about the backwards message that the White House put out yesterday saying that something would come out today, a big announcement? And it turns out the big announcement was about the White House application for your phone. So they basically came out with an app. So you can get the notifications of the great, you can get the notifications on your phone, basically.
You mean our Supreme
in real
Leader?
time. Yes, you can get the notifications on the phone now, so you can get on there and take a look at it. So it's an app. I thought they were going to announce something serious, but they announced an app. But we do have a $10 support from Chris Creative, who said the U.S. gives $3.8 billion to Israel, and they're contracted to spend that money with American defense companies employing Americans, and they also share tech when they approve fighters like the F-35.
Share the Israelis share tech?
Well, the F-35's our plane, I think. So
Yeah,
I'm not sure if they're sharing tech with us about the plane that we created.
Yeah, technically the Israelis kind of like take our tech. If we're talking about like the Mossad, because the Mossad is actually classified here in the United States as a significant intelligence security risk, because the Mossad has this way of like sometimes taking our technology without us giving them permission, so that way the Israelis can put in the cool stuff and the equipment that we sell them that's the export variant that's kind of watered down just a little bit, so that way they don't have perfect on par capabilities that we would have. So I mean, like generally, like I would say this, like Israel definitely is an ally of the United States and serves a purpose within the Middle East, but you know, and I want to say this for a second, folks. When I talk about Europe versus Israel, I'm saying this is with the amount of value we get out of Israel and the money we give them. I don't even know why in the world people would complain about Europe, because Israel is an ally, as any ally is, and is well worth its value with what we give them and what we get out of them. And we spend a lot less on Europe and we get way more out of them. So, you know, why in the world is there a point in complaining about the Europeans and our relationship with them? But outside of that, though, as far as the Israelis go, it's really more so of a one-sided relationship, more in their favor, at least if we're talking militarily with equipment, because they buy our stuff, but they never really provide us with anything in return. Because if you look in the U.S. military, you'll never find anything with a brand logo on it like Israel Weapons Industries or anything like that, because we generally don't buy our stuff.
That's actually not true right there. Actually, we do buy equipment from Israel, but it's not the big ticket stuff. Like Israel is a huge manufacturer of surveillance technologies. Like they sell quite a large amount of that to the United States. Like for example, there's an Israeli company out there that can pretty much break into any modern smartphone for the most part for investigations purposes. So they sell stuff to us. It's just not these, it's not like huge aircraft or something like that. They're not selling stuff like that, but they do sell us defense technologies for certain.
Yeah, but I mean, like, is it like big ticket items like an F-35, or is it smaller ticket items? And it's mostly going to be smaller ticket, more niche items. Like you're not going to hear like the U.S. go, oh, we just filled out a contract for X-95 Tavors. You're never going to hear that one. But you will hear Israel say, we just bought 30 F-15s. And generally they get a significant discount on that because the Congress basically gives them to the Israelis if they want them. So, there's
Oh.
that. Mhm.
So it says here they have Israeli-made UAVs they sell to the United States military. So they sell UAVs. Also, missile defense. They also jointly produce several different interceptors with the
Which
United
ones?
States. They say here components for system like the Arrow, David Sling, and Arrow 3 are developed jointly between the United States and Israel. Also, helmet systems. Apparently, a company, Elbit Systems, produces the helmet-mounted display systems for the F-35, which is used by the Air Force. They also provide loitering munitions as well. Apparently, a bunch of different loitering munitions. And also tactical gear. That's more of a smaller thing right there, but they sell tactical gear. Also, small arms and parts like IWI and things like that, and also components for F-16s as well. So it could be some of this could be license built stuff that's being built in Israel by U.S. companies and then being, maybe shipped back to the United States possibly as well.
But also, all those missile systems that you said they jointly produce, all of them are jointly developed with us, but none of them are used by us. They're all used solely by the Israelis. The U.S. doesn't use any arrows or David slings. Those are entirely used only in Israel.
Yeah, that's generally true. Yeah.
Yeah, so like for example, like Israel didn't jointly develop the Patriot system or the THAAD. Like they weren't involved in that at all. But we go over there and we help them out with developing basically their own indigenous missile system. So, once again, there, it's like, that sounds like it's mutual, but we don't use any of those missile systems. They're the only ones who do. So it's more so helping them out with making their own missile system instead of them making one that benefits to both of us. And, and like, that's fine. Like, I want to make it clear that's fine. But at the same time, though, acting like, the Israelis are worth more in value or even more in spades than Europe if we compare them side to side. I'm never going to see that. I mean, like, to be entirely honest with y'all, you could bulk the entire Middle East together with Israel in it and go, which one's more important, Europe or Europe or the Middle East? If we just had to ditch one and then try and fight to get it back later somehow through diplomatic intrigue or war or whatnot, I would tell you every day the Europeans are going to take top priority because economically and militarily, through them and us combined, we have the power to generally go around and do what we need, even if we did lose the Middle East somehow, some way. We could go and take it back at that point, largely with the combined arms of Europe and also us. You couldn't say that with just Israel and the United States losing Europe and then just keeping the Middle East. That wouldn't be possible. But you could do it the other way around with the Europeans, and that's why I say, as far as an ally in terms of importance, Europe is our most important ally in the globe. Not to discredit any other allies, but at the same time, the reason why I'm trying to say that and argue that is that if Israel is considered a great ally, and in terms of the value and in terms of the spending that we conduct with them, it's we get far less value out of them and we spend a lot more on them, and they're a great ally. Then by that definition, Europe is an amazing ally because we spend far less on the Europeans than we do on Israel, and we get a far lot more out of them. So a great alliance all around, and there's really no reason to change our arrangements with Israel, Europe, or anybody else in the world. It benefits us greatly. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
Best of a 10 from Robbie. And Robbie said, try being an ex-JW, ex-Jehovah Witness, and researching other religions. There's a famous ex-Mormon who did a YouTube video about the similarities and differences between the two. And also Kilroy was here.
Oh, that's interesting. I haven't really looked into a lot of the like groups like Jehovah's Witnesses and stuff. I think that they're not allowed to celebrate their own birthdays. If I'm not mistaken, that's like a thing for them. Like it's a bad dojo to do that. But I haven't really researched and studied them a whole lot, but I do find them quite interesting because I'll tell you one group that I have studied a good bit are the Middle Eastern groups that ascribe themselves to the Islamic faith and their history, and it's actually quite an interesting one, and it's very deep, actually. I would highly encourage that you all learn a little bit about them, like from a more so neutral historical point, because it's very interesting to see where they have been, where they were, and where they are now, and how all of that's evolved. Because it's kind of like movements in other religions in the modern day, to where it becomes like a hyper nationalist, theologically driven ideology, more so than what it used to be way back when in other historical periods. But anyways, with that, a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 10 from Treetop. And Treetop said, totally loaded question, but if you had to guess, where would Airborne be dropping in if you were the general? Completely a risk question, not meant to be serious.
I mean, to be upfront, I wouldn't drop them anywhere right now. There's just not enough preparatory work that's been done to make a spot to drop them in. If we were saying that that was being included, then I would drop them somewhere around the Strait of Hormuz. But even still, that's a very dangerous spot to put them in. And really, to be frank, Karg Island and the islands in the Strait of Hormuz are basically in the same condition if you land troops on them, that the casualties will probably be pretty significant, sadly. So I hope that does address it the best I can. And a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a super chat here from Spaghetti, who put in a 5. He said, if the U.S. Is targeted tonight, based on the address that we heard, where might be a safe place to take my kids? No, and it's not going to be anything like that, by the way. Like, just make that clear. The United States itself is not going to get targeted in this war right here. Now, of course, there's always a threat of like lone wolves and stuff like that. There's always a threat of that. We have seen threats to military bases, but I don't think we don't have to get that specific with it for the most part. I would say I wouldn't even worry about it personally. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say generally most people here in the States are incredibly safe. The one thing you have to worry about is the loonies here in America. That's really the biggest threat to common citizens here in this country. But outside of that, there's not really going to be any sort of a direct threat that ever materializes here in the United States. So you should be safe. And all of us should be, generally. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from a viewer whose name I think is in Hebrew, possibly. But thank you very much for that support right there. They said, what's the reason for strategic mistakes of the U.S. government?
Hubris, arrogance, incompetence, a general combination of the three. That's something that we've been watching for 4 years now. The whole time we've been covering the news. It's been really a shame, honestly, because it was getting very annoying by the time the last administration was coming to its end of term. And then it's like the current one has taken the torch and they're sprinting like Usain Bolt at this point. With the torch of just having insane amounts of incompetence, hubris, and arrogance all combined into one. Because we were complaining about the foreign policy position for years under the last administration. We were talking about how, because of inaction, we were basically squandering East Asia, the Middle East, and Europe. And now under the current administration, due to active actions and decisions that are being made, we're screwing them over even worse than if we were doing nothing. And neither of those positions is a good approach to take, but that's generally what I would explain has been the failing of modern policy in foreign relations and diplomacy in the past 4 years. Basically, the whole time we've been covering this channel is those three generally combined into a near fatal cocktail for the U.S. in the long term. And I wish that we would see that that would change, but I don't think it's going to change until some people in the country, which are the voter base, wake up and start voting people in from either side, it doesn't matter who, that actually look forward and ahead more clinically than just being viral or, just being liked. Because it's one thing to be liked, it's another thing to be competent, and we just don't see a lot of competence from either side these days when it comes to actually managing the country's affairs. And a lot of people, and I already know that some people are going to be like, oh, well, like the other side does this and that. No, we've been looking at it very neutrally for the past 4 years, and it has been quite atrocious from both ends. The last administration was atrocious because they would hardly do anything at all, and because of that, they would squander a lot of opportunities or a lot of moments where action was necessary because they really wouldn't do anything anywhere. The current administration does everything everywhere, but they do it in the exact wrong way that's supposed to be done. The complete opposite of what would be beneficial to America is the action they take 9 times out of 10, which ends up being as destructive as doing nothing, if even more. And neither one of those is the approach that the United States needs. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to I Am the Real, who puts in a 5. He said, I've been sad since the war started. I can't talk to my friend in Iran because of the internet outage, and his show helps cheer me up.
Oh, we're happy to cheer you up, and hopefully your friend is all right over there. I hope that they are. And I got to thank you massively for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from a grain of salt who said, have you guys thought about what you could do if the war news ever gets mild, and maybe interest commentary like trains, martial arts, etc.? And love you guys in LSA. Also, by the way, to be straight up honest, we don't really think that far down the road. Like, there is so much stuff going on right now, like it's hard to even think that far down the road. And also, we plan on covering news. There's always news to cover. It's never going to be, unfortunately, it's never going to be peaceful in the world. It's just not built that way. So there will always be news to cover. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would say generally, yeah, we never really think that far down the road, because back in the day when the Ukraine war started, we used to think, okay, well, what would happen if the war ended? And the reality, sadly, is that if a war ever ends, there's another one happening somewhere. And that basically means that as far as our coverage for war-related news, we're never going to be out of business, because there's never going to be a time in the history of this world where we will be without war. So a big thanks to you for the support. Sadly, we probably will never get into getting to think about more fun and abstract things than covering war and business-related stuff with foreign policy, but that's pretty much going to be our bread and butter for as long as we can tell at this point. But with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from David Croton, and thank you very much, David, for that 5. He said, "I love that picture."
And I thank you so much for the support, and I gotta say, I love it too. It's a great picture, and a big thanks to you once again, and with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Game Theory, who said, "You should be paid by Salt Lake City. You are the best advertisement for the city's image."
And I'd have to say a big thanks to you for the support, and that wouldn't be something that we complain against. I wouldn't complain about that at all. Would you, Matthew? I wouldn't.
To get paid, me personally, I don't know about getting paid.
First, they offered me $1,000, and I said I'm not a man who could be bought. Then they offered me $3,000. Hello, I'm with the Department of Salt Lake City Tourism. Beyond that, I'm just kidding around. A big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from DWRB, who said, "Bring a model train with you to Mount Everest. Sounds like a great idea. An LSA."
An LSA, and that would be a great idea right there. I like that idea. It's a good idea, a solid one even. And I gotta thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we also have a 5 from Coleman, who said, "Iran is claiming to have eliminated a bunch of Marines with a ballistic missile on Buyan Island. And anyone know anything about that?" And that's complete bollocks and bullshit. It's complete bollocks. But Enforcer, what say you?
It is. I was about to say that. But a big thanks to you for support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from DWRB, who said, "If John Wick were a real person, do you think he could single-handedly take out the IRGC?"
Oh, sure. John Wick's unstoppable. And a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from DWRB once again. He said, "No love for the F-21 Kafir from Israel."
Hold up. I gotta go take a look at this thing. Hold up. Oh, yeah, you're right. Yeah, this thing's pretty dastardly looking, really. If I'm correct... Oh?
It's like a ballistic missile with wings and a vertical stabilizer.
Yeah, pretty much. I think this thing is an evolution of the Dassault Etendard or the Mirage. No, it's a Dassault Mirage 5 that's been souped up by the Israelis. Back in the day, folks, people don't know this, but the Israelis were not in good graces with the United States for most of their history. So most of their equipment was actually bought from the British and the French, because the British and the French liked them more than we did, largely up until about the 80s. And that's when we started to kind of get a lot more heavier in with the Israelis. And the only reason that we did that is because the Iranians... Shah was overthrown, and then they installed the Islamic regime, and then that's when we're like, well, actually, it was Reagan at the time. He was like, "Hey, y'all are some cool little dudes. Would you like an F-15 and an F-16? And the Israelis were like, yeah. And then we started giving the equipment to them. But until then, they were using nothing but French and British stuff. Let me actually show y'all some of the, let's see, the older aircraft of the Israeli Air Force, because the starting plane that they had is probably the craziest one. They were BF-109s.
That's crazy.
They bought them after the end of the Second World War. Literally right afterwards, there was just a whole bunch of these sitting around in the Czech Republic, and they just bought, well, Czechoslovakia, and they just bought a whole ton of them, and they brought them down to Israel. So the planes that basically won Israel's independence in the Israeli War of Independence were German-made, and specifically from the very party that basically persecuted them up until the end of the Second World War, which is very ironic in a way. But outside of that, let me see here. I got to show y'all. Oh, well, they had some American aircraft back then. Well, where in the world are all the British and French provided ones? They didn't show any of those. Oh, well, I'd have to go and find them later, sadly. But a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Up next, a big shout out to Blazant, who put in a $3 super chat, along with Quarantine. You also put in a 2 as well, and a huge shout out to Blazant and Quarantine for that support. And we also have a super chat from none other than SB and also Spaghetti once again. They each put in a 2, and we also appreciate y'all for that support. We also have a 5 from Nico Hudson. He said, any recommendations on YouTube history channels or podcasts to listen to?
I would say that, let's see, it's, I can't remember the guy's name, but, he does really good videos. I think it's like Tales from the Past or something like that. He's got like about 400 something or 500,000 subscribers. He covers lesser known stories of history, like the sinking of the SS Hungarian and the wreck of the Broker and stuff. It's a very great channel. I love watching his stuff. Really good. I would recommend as well. Oh, dang, I'm trying to think of a couple. It's really hard to come up with them right now because honestly, I'm quite tired and I'm having a hard time thinking on it. But I would say that his channel is a really good one. Oceanliner Designs is a really good one for ship-related content. Dragnefell is also really good for that too. That's really all the ones I can think of off the top of my head right now. There's a couple out there that a lot of people would swear by, but to be entirely honest with y'all, I've listened to their videos lately, and they're getting a lot of historical facts wrong on a couple of those channels to the point that I'm like, I don't know what this guy's doing anymore. But anyways, with that, I hope that is addressed to the best I can. And big thanks to you for supporting helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we're on to the next one.
Also have a 5 from Ryan H. on Orbs. He said, hello, Enforcers. Check out the Signal Coupe Mountain. And I was surprised to learn it's one of the highest hotels, sits on the summit.
Let's see. I think I know that one. Isn't that where, yeah, this is where they sell the pizzas. I've seen someone actually climb to this thing on YouTube, and it's really cool because they have this view up here in the mountains in the Alps. Isn't that cool? Isn't that cool?
That wasn't the old painter's hangout, was it?
No, that would be Berchtesgaden. That's down in let's see, I forget. Oh hell, I forgot where. Let me go over there and look at it really quickly. That'd be over here at Berchtesgaden, at the Kalsteinhaus, which is this building right here, and this is Little Mustache Man's former hangout.
Aha.
Yeah, it's still there, crazily enough. But outside of that, though, this one is down on the Swiss-Italian border, right there. And this is one of the highest, I think this is the highest hotel in the world. And they actually have to bring all of the stuff up here. It's not really like a ritzy hotel, by the way, folks. It's like really, really utilitarian. It's basically just for people to sleep there and then climb back down the next day. But a really cool spot. And a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 2 from SCR. And they said, watching from the official White House app, LSA. And I highly doubt that. We're probably definitely not on that app. I promise you that. Oh, boy. Oh, man, I'll tell you what. If we were on cable television, I'm sure we'd be getting some flack. But thankfully, we're on the internet, so we get to still exercise freedom of speech in this country. But Enforcer, what say you?
And a big thanks to you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say, thank you for helping this channel to be possible. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 10 from William, who said, use real-time radiation world map. Had to clean up some nut jobs attempt at some type of device up where you are 30 years ago.
Oh, that's interesting. I think I know who you're talking about, but I do thank you massively for the support and helping this channel.
You know them?
No, I don't know them personally. I just think I know who they're talking about, like the name of the person. I think it was a certain Kaczynski, wasn't it?
I don't think he ever messed around with anything like that.
Which one is it again? Which one is it? Which one is it? Yeah. Which super chat is it again? Let me go find it here really quickly.
Williams. It's in the live chat.
William. William. Well, sadly, I can't find it. I'm hardly functioning over here at this point. I'm dead beaten tired. But anyways, with that, a big thanks to you for support. I hope that it's addressed that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Game Theory, who said, when is your first live event?
We don't know. Generally, we haven't done a live event because security would be kind of hard to coordinate to an extent and also fund to be able to do a live event. So we don't ever know if we're going to do a live event. We might have to wait until we're a lot larger and have more funds to work with to be able to try and do something like that. And we probably would just do it here in Salt Lake. But a big thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep on running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
We also have a 5 from Kyle Padell. He said, we can't forget Pektu Mountain.
Oh, it's the great leader Kim Jong-il, born on the mountain under a double rainbow and shooting star, which happens in day and night, but happen at the same time, according to the story. Oh, like long live Kim Jong-il. But yeah, this is the mountain. You can actually see it on the Chinese side. They have like a little staircase and an observation platform and everything over here. On the North Korean side, they basically have nothing because to them, it's sacred. But when the Chinese do anything to the mountain, they don't care because China is basically their breadwinner. But a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
In the meantime, a big shout out to Mark Andre Burnett, who put in a $2 support, and we do appreciate you very much, Mark. We also have a 2 from Adam James Abroad. He said, let's see, global chaos soon.
Maybe. And a big thanks to you for support, and we're on to the next one.
We also have a 2 from Elka, and Elka said, my intuition says that we may be out of the loop.
Maybe. But usually things are pretty easy to observe up front. But a big thanks to you for supporting with that. We're on to the next one.
You know who else is out of the loop? Congress. They're also out of the loop. Speaking of people that's generally out of the loop, they're complaining about not getting much information from the executive branch about what's going on. They're bitching about these briefings that they're getting or not really telling them the full picture. So we might be out of the loop, but the problem is though, when we say out of the loop, it means we're not privy to exactly how bad the situation is. That's what out of the loop means. It doesn't mean that we're missing some 4D chess move. It means we're missing the basically the depth of the bad situation, basically. But anyways, moving into our next one. This one goes to Fred Vreeman, who puts in it too. He said, I love the intro. It's too short.
Well, we could extend it, Fred, but I think we're going to keep it at 8 minutes probably. It's a pretty decent length, but sadly it cuts out an entire song that I had made and orchestrated and everything because it made the intro too long. But a big thanks to you for the support. And also on top of that, out of the loop, like people say out of the loop on this one, but it's like, you know, I mean, technically, if you look at it, folks, we've never been in the loop on anyone. I mean, we've never been sitting in the office of the president of Zelensky listening to him talk about the war in Ukraine or Putin's office. And as far as our analysis has gone on that, it has been some of the most solid analysis that you can find out there. I mean, hardly any of it has aged like milk over 4 straight years. And much less on any other conflict that we've ever covered did the analysis age like milk because we weren't able to get the in-depth knowledge from the situation room of whatever countries that were involved on how that was going. I mean, most of the stuff, if you just pay attention well and can connect dots well in a realistic way, you don't have to sit down with the president and have him yap about how great he is to you to really be able to know what's going on. It's either going good or it isn't. And this hasn't been really going well since the opening days. And, you know, we've been saying that. And a lot of people always are now saying, well, you know, you don't know because you're not in the White House. But, I mean, at the same time, though, when we were saying back in the day about the former president that he was doing things wrong, no one batted an eye. And nobody was ever saying back then that we need to be in the situation room and sit with him and serve his table and stuff and listen to him. Because, I mean, stuff is obviously bad when it's not being done well, and you can just tell. You don't have to be in the situation room to know it. But when this president comes around, now we have to sit down with him in the situation room with a top security clearance to be able to speak on it. And that's just really bogus. I mean, we've never had to do that, and the analysis has largely been like 8 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 times correct. And it still is at this point, because a lot of what we said would happen before the war happened. And, I mean, we got it dead to rights, and we didn't have to be in the situation room or anywhere else near the president to even get that correct. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we're on to the next one.
We also have a $1 support from the DJ Waves. He said, ever tried Costco ribs? And I didn't really like them that much. I'll be honest. I wasn't a big fan of the ribs, but I like the rotisserie. But Enforcer, what say you?
And I thank you so much for the support. I've never had the ribs myself, but I'll have to try them one day and see if they're good. But a huge thanks to you for support and helping this channel to keep it running. And with that in mind, folks, we have time for live chats. Time for Beanie. And it's time for us to get on into all of those live chats. And Matthew, please, take it away. What do we got?
Okay, so tonight we had the entire roster of Morse code decoders. We had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabelle Garbo, Arroyo Fluffiness, Coach Cobertary Sire, Brian Blairstown, and Cryptid Clippy. They said, the Morse code says, what do you say when you see something that you don't like? Iran. LTLSA.
And that's the same one from last night. And that's the sound of money. And whether it's the same one from last night or not, y'all still got that dead on the nail. And that was the Morse code message. I got to congratulate y'all greatly on getting that correct time and time again, because y'all are always getting it dead on the nail. And so a humongous congrats to y'all once again for getting that correct. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on and into the live chat questions. We have about 5 minutes to address them. And also, I see some people saying you can like certain things the president does. And I'll have to say, there is a couple of things that I have liked. It's just that, you know, they don't really happen in foreign policy. Like, for one, I like that there was some attention put towards the Salt Lake and fixing the issue with it. I mean, that's a good thing. And there's been a couple of other things as well. Like, for one, going to war with Iran, that was a pretty good idea. I mean, you know, although it's been poorly executed, the concept of going to war with Iran is not a bad one. It's a necessary one. So that's something that I generally agreed with. And we said, you know, finally, it's a long time coming, but this had to happen at some point. I mean, there's a couple of things that I can say, yeah, you know, I definitely say that that was a good thing to do here and there. But, you know, like, people these days act like, you know, you either have to hate the person just ridiculously so to where everything they do is wrong, or you have to love them to where you can't ever say that anything they're doing might not be the best thing to do. And in reality of it, I mean, like, I'll just be kind of upfront with y'all. Most of what he's doing is completely wrong, and it's actually against America's interest. There are a few things out there that are good, and I won't deny that. But at the same time, when we actually watch them in execution, like the war in Iran's a good idea, and then when the execution comes around of how do we actually carry out that war, it's done poorly, you know. And it's like, you know, you can't deny that. Like, I'm all in support of the war, but I can't deny that it's been planned and executed poorly up to this point, a month in. And, you know, that's the sort of reality that we live in. You know, and a lot of people say, oh, well, you know, it's a 4D chess move. But here's the thing, folks. That's putting a lot of bias into this. If it's up front physically looking like it's going badly, it's going badly. Because if I say that this guy's doing 4D chess, and that we just don't know what's really happening and trust the system, well, then all of y'all can criticize the last president, because we have to use the same metric for him, because we, like, on this channel, we can't have any bias. If we're criticizing people, we're criticizing everybody, and we have. Or we're acting like everybody's perfect, you know. And so if we say that this guy has some sort of 4D chess plan, I have to go back to the last president and say he actually had a 4D chess plan as well, although by the end of his term, everything had gone about as badly as it could have in most ways but Ukraine. But anyways, with that, it's time for us to get on into the live chats. What do we got, Matthew?
So the live chat question here goes to Sean. He said, opinion of the closure of the Red Sea, Houthis, and the Strait by Iran at the same time. And it's going to be challenging, to say the least. It's going to be a challenge because the Red Sea Strait is more about the trade. There's a lot more global trade of goods that goes through the Red Sea Strait. The Strait of Hormuz is more about energy products getting through that strait, and then also mainly going to Asia, and also kind of going to Europe as well, to a large degree. Also, not to mention the rare gases, like, for example, helium, that are going to have a hard time getting out of there as well. So it's a bit of a problem, to say the least. But Enforcer, what say you?
Yeah, it's definitely a lurch, and it's going to be a very difficult situation to deal with. And I wish we had had some proactive vision to deal with the Houthis in the prior administration, or before this war started in the current one, because I was a big fan of that, and nobody did it at all, and it appears to have been a mistake. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the third to last question of the night.
And this one goes to King, who said, do you think the U.S. would nuke the nuclear facilities to destroy them? And I don't think they will, me personally. Now, I will say there's really no way to destroy these nuclear sites without using something like a tactical nuke, because we only have, like, the GBU-57 MOP. I think is one of the largest ground penetrator ordnances that we have in our arsenal right now. It can only be dropped from a B-2 stealth bomber because of the size of it. So that's one of the largest ones we have. So that cannot reach, like, for example, Pickaxe Mountain, which we still haven't seen Pickaxe Mountain struck, by the way. We still haven't seen that in this current war, which is kind of odd. But there's nothing that can really reach that far down. So you really can't destroy it with airstrikes. So you kind of have to go in on the ground and manually destroy it, which is a huge feat on its own. So I don't think they will do that for the most part. I don't think they're going to use nukes. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would highly doubt it. Any use would be absolutely insane in this current situation. That would be really uncalled for, and there really wouldn't be a way to justify it under U.S. nuclear doctrine. So I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the second to last question of the night.
We also have a question from Ferdinand, who said, will the ground invasion be from Pakistan or Iraq?
There will highly likely not be a cross-border invasion, but if there was one, it will most likely come from Iraq. But even that is an incredibly small, and I mean wildly small possibility. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. And so, who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
And this one is going to go to none other than Mike Silva, who said, do you think that we will see flamingos flying in this theater of war in Iran?
Highly unlikely. The U.S. won't use them. Ukraine most likely would never directly strike the Iranians, and most other countries inside the Middle East are probably not going to be purchasing flamingos either, because it would take a lot of time for crews to be trained on how to operate them and fire them, and for that reason, it would highly unlikely be used. But I hope that does address that the best we can. And also, before we round this thing out, we actually have two last super chats to cover. So, Matthew, what do we got?
So we have a 10 from Play Street Fighter, who said, how much of an impact will it have on the war in Ukraine and Iran once Captain America thaws out of that ice?
Oh, it's going to have a big impact. Captain America coming down with hands, rated E for everyone. And so a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
You know, rumor has it, I said about Captain America when he landed in Iraq, they said the rumor has it that Captain America must be from Iraq, the way they bagged that ass up. Damn. Our next one goes to Jason, who puts in a 5 and said the U.S. likely deploy troops to counter expected Houthi aggression from Yemen and not Iran directly.
That might be the case, but the Strait of Hormuz is a ongoing crisis, and we would generally believe that some sort of an action that they're going to take is going to try and relieve that crisis. Otherwise, this will continue to get worse on the global oil markets and the economy if this continues. So a big thanks to you for support. I hope that does address that the best that I possibly can. And a big thanks to you so much once again for helping this channel to keep on running and making this thing possible. And with that, folks, it is the end of tonight's stream. We've got to thank you all so much for being here and watching. We've had 180,000 people watch this stream over the course of 3.5 hours, and we had a peak viewership of 22.5 thousand people. That's a lot of people, and we thank you all so much for having been here over the course of this stream. It's a wonderful thing, and we love to know that many of y'all consider this channel to be your primary source of news. And with that in mind, we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of the news from around the world. And if there is a short war video to be made, if we have enough news by that point, Enforcer Matt will be the one making that video. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, Slava Granny, Haram Slava, long live the East Spring Army, and long live the Republic.
And with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow on the Nightly Warning Stream at 10 p.m. Eastern, as always, to cover the rest of the news throughout the day. And there will most likely be a short war video tomorrow, because I can tell you right now, the Houthi news, that might make a good video title right there. So there will probably be a video out midday tomorrow, almost certainly, but don't count on it, though. Don't count on it. Just wait and see if it comes out. If you have the bell button hit, it'll give you a notification on your phone, kind of like that app that came out today might do as well. A little ding, 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 a little bit of news coming out. But anyways, though, a huge shout out to the almost 200,000 people that joined us tonight, and we will see you all tomorrow once again. And of course, Slava Ukraine, Herom Slava, get some rest, and good night.